Together, we will make America great again.
RPN is not responsible for the views, actions, statements, or opinions of its guests, advertisers, or even its viewers. The information contained in this program is not to be confused with medical or legal advice. An appearance on this platform is not necessarily an endorsement, but as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show. Good evening, everyone. And of course, welcome back. Yes, to another very exciting episode of Red Pill News Live. Hope you guys are having a great day. We've got a lot to talk about, as we always do. Today is pretty much going to be a power slam through the SCOTUS arguments earlier today. I thought John Sauer did a great job. I think that man is brilliant. Every time he makes a legal argument, it's wonderful. Of course, the problem is not his ability to make a legal argument. The problem is the interpretation of the justices of the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, I feel the plain text language of the 14th Amendment, the thoughts, the notes, the debate of the actual people who wrote it and discussed whether or not it should be passed. I feel that their intent in getting it passed was so specific, and illegal aliens and their children are not meant to be covered by it. So, long story short, I thought that John Sauer did a great job with the tariffs argument. I thought he did a great job today with the 14th Amendment argument. But I don't know. I don't know how this is going to break. I have to be really honest with you. If I had my way, you know exactly what I do. But I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a SCOTUS justice. So what I need from you is to sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn, because we've got a lot to discuss, and we're going to get into it in just a moment. So when is the last time that you ever physically held your investment? Not checked an app, not watched a number move on a screen, but I mean physically held something in your hand. Because that's what I love about gold. It's real, it's tangible, and it's yours. There's no passwords, there's no logins, no 6-digit codes texted so you can gain access. Because in a world that is getting more and more digital every single day, more abstract, more complicated, gold is just simple. And that's why you're seeing a massive shift into precious metals, because as everything is moving into the cloud, people are starting to see the value in what they can actually hold, because there's something truly powerful about that. Because real ownership is becoming rare, more rare every single day. So if you want to see what that looks like for you, then check out noblegoldinvestments.com/redpill78. The best part is right now, all new qualified accounts are going to receive a free 1/10 of an ounce American Gold Eagle as a thank you. That's real gold in your hands, because that's the whole point. Noble Gold makes it simple. You choose what fits your budget, whether it's coins, bars, whatever makes sense, because it's going to ship right to your door, fully insured. So visit noblegoldinvestments.com/redpill78. And when you support my sponsors, you also support this channel. Florida for Trump. Did y'all see the Gnome boobies? Just saying. I didn't show it on the show yesterday. I thought that it was just a little bit too weird. But I did tell everybody, you can go to Twitter and you can find it all day long. It's exactly what you think. It's a man wearing some type of a fake breast top. I don't even know how you describe it. It's probably got a technical name, but I've never done any research on this stuff before, other than to say that Kristi Noem's husband definitely likes to dress up like a woman and be feminized in some fashion. Now, the story is still developing. I guess media have been looking out to reach out to him to try to get an interview. And I guess he says he's gonna do an interview. Yeah, poor Kristi. That's who I feel bad for. I mean, like, geez, oh, Pete. Who wants to find a picture of their husband on the front page of the New York Times wearing a prosthetic breasts, talking to OnlyFans girls and paying $25,000 or more. Like, my goodness. Anyways, it's probably going to lead to a divorce, I would imagine. I can't imagine a world where they stay together. It's just a tragic story. So I feel pretty, oh, so pretty. I don't know if he's even having that much class with it, Freya. It's probably a much darker obsession that he's dealing with. All right. Anyways, today is April 1st. I'm not going to trick anybody, but I did want to go, first of all, to this tweet from my man, Tim Burchett. I still think that Tim Burchett is the MVP of the House of Representatives. And I every time he puts something out, there's always like some level of humor with it. And I just really appreciate it. So you may or may not know, today is the day that NASA and the Artemis mission are launching a new rocket to send astronauts back to the moon. Not actually onto the moon, but just around the moon. And you might have stopped dead in your tracks when you heard me say back to the moon. And that's actually exactly what Tim Burchett said. Somebody said, we go back to the moon today, historic. And Burchett just said, back? Back? Dadgummit? Did we ever go in the first place? I never thought Tim Burchett would be the guy to question whether or not the moon missions actually happened, but that's exactly what he's doing right here. So I find that to be just very, very funny. All right, so keep it up, Tim. Thank you very much. Also, have a couple of updates for you on the story of the couple that we talked about yesterday in Jacksonville, Allison and Gary Garrett, who lost their miniature horses after their home of 38 years burned down. I also heard from some people who know them, and they said, yes, you know, it's sad sometimes when people are elderly. They have to put their money into places that they otherwise might not, which means that they couldn't afford to have homeowners insurance. So I don't want to put too much blame on them for that. It unfortunately happens. I mean, it's just one of those things. People get older, they're living on a fixed income, and they don't have the resources to put into everything. Now, the horses are not returned to them, but we did learn some new information about actually where the horses went. And it appears that Miss Vicky at the rescue ranch did some allegedly inappropriate things with regard to the seizure of these horses. First of all, we're going to check in with this very short clip from Fox 30 Action Jackson News, and we're going to get our first update.
Say their horses were taken in by an animal rescue and never returned. Action News Jax first told you last week this happened after their home burned down. Action News Jax Casey Stone has the latest on the couple's fight to get their horses back.
Behind me is the last place that Allison and Gary Garrett saw their miniature horses before they were taken by Vicky's rescue ranch under what they thought was a temporary arrangement. But now, as it approaches day 20 with no solutions, they're looking to take their fight a step further to get their horses back. Allison and Gary Garrett were rescued from their Mandarin area home early on March 8th after it was completely engulfed in flames. Amidst the chaos, a neighbor recommended Vicky.
Now, just in case anybody wasn't here yesterday, what happened was Allison and Gary woke up in the middle of the night. Their house was on fire. Their miniature horses were in danger of being killed. They were quite literally trying to save themselves, and a neighbor suggested Miss Vicky's rescue. It's like Vicky's Rescue Ranch. That's what it is. And so Vicky showed up in the middle of the night, took the horses, and Allison and Gary say that they assumed they were getting their horses back. Miss Vicky said, no, you surrendered the horses. That is the problem right there, because the law is actually very specific down here in Florida. A surrender and a rescue are two entirely different things. And apparently what is required by Miss Vicky's Rescue Ranch in order to legally have these horses surrendered to her was not actually gotten. A verbal agreement, which is what Vicky says she and Allison had, is not legally binding, and it is against the law down here in Florida. There has to be a written separation and surrender agreement, and Vicky never actually got that. So as far as the law is concerned, these horses were taken, and I think Allison and Gary were taken advantage of. That is my opinion.
Animal rescue come and get the couple's 10 miniature horses, many of them and their family for decades. But they had one huge problem. The Garretts thought that the rescue arrangement was temporary, and they haven't seen their horses since they were taken away from their fire-damaged property.
I had no idea that this meant that I wasn't getting my animals back.
Their agreement was verbal, so there was no signed contract stating that the Garretts surrendered these horses. After receiving mountains of support from the horse community and Action News Jax viewers watching at home, the Garretts filed a police report with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and contacted an attorney about their case. We dug a little further into Vicky's rescue ranch, and using state and federal databases, we couldn't find the rescue listed as a nonprofit or licensed with the state or federal government.
So 2 additional very important things. Miss Vicky's Rescue Ranch claimed to be a nonprofit organization. It does not legally appear to be one. She also, as stated, does not have the proper licensure to act in the way that she is. So this appears, by all intents and purposes, to simply be a grift, a theft of these horses. And it gets even worse, you guys. Wait until we dive into what actually happened to these horses. The good news also is that Allison and Gary were able to achieve legal representation. So they actually do have a lawyer now.
Or registered as a corporation. We spoke with Debbie Dorino, an animal rights activist who helped get animal abuse prevention laws passed in Florida.
She has to have a surrender form signed by the owners of what the intent is. She also has to have a license from the Department of Agriculture. She can't function as a rescue without that.
We reached out to Vicky for comment, and she says that she wants to make it clear that Allison and Gary Garrett did surrender these animals and that she hasn't made any profit from these horses.
Now, that is a very interesting statement. Vicky says she hasn't made any profit from these horses. Well, let me just read you from the email that I received from people who actually know Allison and Gary. All right, so, and it looks like I just got a new email from her, so let me jump down to the earlier one so that okay, so, let's see. It looks like Vicky may have actually sold these horses to her friend Donna Tomlinson, because Donna Tomlinson placed these horses on an auction site, Ocala Auction. She placed these horses on March 29th. Now, Allie West, apparently, it looks to be the person who actually was in charge of the auction, and people believe they have connected Vicky and Allie together as relatives. Also, according to the head of the Ocala Horse Auction Society, whose name is Scotty Campbell, he removed those minis from the online auction before they could be sold. But 6 of them have now been returned to Allison, and they just wanted to say thank you to everybody who had given prayers for them and the successful completion of this. There was also at least one of these horses that had already been sold to somebody else locally. And because of what Vicky Davis Bozeman had done, it was, essentially a theft from that person as well. But if you'll remember, Allison said, when Vicky showed up, I was in a daze. The house was still burning down. I had no options. These horses were my family, my animal family. Now, thank God they've gotten the proper help that they can need up until this time, but they do not have all of the horses back. Now, there is one more update on the story since that time. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
Horses after a local rescue group took them following a fire has now recovered 6 of them. Action News Jax's Casey Stone tells us where the missing horses were and what you can do to help.
Allison and Gary Garrett suffered that house fire earlier this month, but before that fire, they actually sold one of their miniature horses to Ashley Hum. She, like many others, were posting to Facebook horse groups for weeks trying to find her new horse, Rosie. But over the weekend, she finally got the text that she had been hoping for.
A couple of girls that had posted stuff about the ponies being missing, that they saw Rosie on the Ocala auction website and sent us a screenshot.
That's right. Rosie was a few weeks away from being auctioned in Ocala. The Garrett's farrier, Lexi Willits, found the advertisement for Rosie on Facebook Saturday night. She checked the auction's website and discovered a total of 3 listings from the same seller, all of which showed horses the Garretts have been searching for weeks. She contacted the auction the following morning and was told that the same seller had 6 or 7 total listings and that the others were in the process of being put on the website. But the seller was not Vicki Davis, the owner of Vicki's Rescue Ranch, which initially took the horses following the fire. It was someone else. The Garretts thought that their horses would be temporarily cared for by the rescue until they could take them back, not sold off to new owners. The law firm that took the Garrett's case pro bono, Terrell Hogan, tells Action News Jax that they're still putting together all of the moving pieces in this case.
It looks like it's been made as complicated as possible, using go-betweens and intermediaries to make it hard to track down these horses and who's putting them into auctions and all of that.
The Garrett's attorney, Alexis Baraskis, says there does seem to be some sort of relationship between Davis and the person who listed the horses, but details are still being investigated. But what we do know is that 6 of these horses have been found and are in good hands. Now, there are still 3 horses missing. For more information on what those horses look like and who you can contact if you see them, visit actionnewsjax.com.
All right, so 3 horses left to find out there in the wild. I am so disgusted that people behave in this way. It's absolutely unconscionable to take advantage of anybody, but it's even more disgusting to take advantage of an elderly couple who are dealing with the total loss of their lifetime possessions and family home, and then you steal their animals. My God, there's a special place in hell that's reserved for people like those women right there that did that to Allison and Gary. So good news, 6 of the horses have been returned. 3 of them are still not yet found. I can only hope that these individuals who perpetrated this act find themselves being criminally charged, because at this point, it's quite clear that this was a very sophisticated attempt to try to rob these people, not only of their property, but their family. So I wanted to thank also the viewer who had sent me this information over. And let me check this new email. The rescue trafficker woman, Vicky, is showing video snip of the back of Allison's place, acting like that's where the minis lived. So deceitful. The county animal rescue only came to cut the wire fence for access to another part of the property. In 35 years of raising minis, Allison has never had a complaint of animal abuse. Her minis did get out a couple of times over the years, but she got cited for it, but that was it. That happens, right? Animals get loose sometimes. Vicky's just trying to cover her rear and make Allison look negligent, which, of course, that's exactly what she's trying to do. She does not want to be charged. She doesn't also want to have her reputation ruined, but I think that she's done a great job doing that herself. I think that it sounds to me like Vicky saw dollar signs when she found this boondoggle presented in her lap. My goodness, 10 miniature horses. Those are going to sell like hotcakes. I see people in the chat asking, do we still hang horse thieves? Maybe out west, but not down here in Florida. So anyways, if you guys could just continue praying for Allison and Gary that they find those other horses. Now, also, if you're a Florida resident, I have some good news. This is something I've been discussing for quite some. You know what I just thought about? There was another story that I did several months ago about an elderly gentleman who had all of his beehives stolen. He had like 20 or 25 beehives. He was a retired gentleman, probably around Allison and Gary's age, and the way that he made money was by raising these bees and then selling the honey and then the wax products as well. And somebody came onto his property and they like started clear cutting, which is also a violation. If you cut down somebody else's trees, you, of course, are going to have to pay for that damage, and oftentimes it can be quite expensive. But they also stole all of his beehives, and the people who stole them acted like they did nothing wrong, just like Miss Vicky here. And eventually he was able to get some of those beehives back with the help of the local beekeeping community. But much like the local mini horse community, they also rallied around that gentleman. And I thought that was so great. I love being able to report on things like that, expose the people who are taking advantage of the elderly, and then watch them get their comeuppance. But down here in Florida, property taxes are a big deal. We've been talking about property tax relief in a number of different ways. There are several different ballot measures that are supposed to go on the ballot in November. The problem with those different ballot measures is that in order for any of them to be adopted, 60% of Florida voters have to vote on one of them. If less than 60% of Florida voters say yes to either one or a number of them, well, it can't be possible. I guess you could have 50% on one, 50% on another. But the point of having like multiple ballot measures is so that nobody gets to 60%. It looks like the Florida Senate has actually just finally passed a law to abolish property taxes down here in Florida, albeit with a single caveat. Property taxes that go for the funding of schools are still going to be in effect. I don't know if this applies only to homesteaded properties or if it's all Florida properties. It would make more sense to me if this only applied to Florida properties. Are we sure the government doesn't have a hand in stealing the horses? Or are you talking about property taxes? Cupton 1, Cupton 62. I don't know. You'll have to specify on there. But yes, the Florida Senate has finally, I guess, passed this law. I believe this already went through the House. So that means that in January of 2027, all property taxes that are not related to the funding of schools will be cut off of your property tax bill. I did some checking. My property taxes are about $8,000 a year. This will reduce my property taxes to less than $2,000 a year, which is pretty cool. And it's funny you say the school portion is the highest. I was going to say that next, but I actually did the checking on it, and I checked in my county Flagler. And the amount of taxes that I pay would end up being less than $2,000. So they actually have a lot of property taxes that are going for other things. It's just a bunch of little things that go together. So probably the single largest thing, that is on your property taxes are schools, and then they have a whole bunch of other things. Yeah, definitely less than $2,000, down from $8,000 a year. That's much, much better. However, until I actually get a chance to see this legislation, I won't be able to tell you exactly how this is going to go. Let me say thank you to Sherry K. Hey, Zach, do we know how the house caught fire? No, we do not know how the house caught fire. Could it have been a grift on all levels, including referring the neighbor? Sorry, Mike. No. You're absolutely onto something. I mean, it seems that the neighbor obviously would have known about the horses. The neighbor also seemed to have known Vicky. Perhaps the viewer in the chat who sent me the emails, why don't you see if you can find anything out about the neighbor and Vicky's relationship? Tell me about that, because that actually is a question that I think should be asked. And then also to Darla, who says, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Zach and Lisa, for all your hard work. You make a great team. Much love to you. Thank you for that. I appreciate you. All right, now, looking forward to not paying as much in property taxes. I think that this is something that needs to happen. All right, now, we also have an update on the situation we reported on yesterday with James O'Keefe. James O'Keefe received an injunction for domestic violence yesterday while he was live on the air. He was served by a sheriff's deputy from the West Palm Beach Sheriff's Department. Now, what's funny is that obviously James O'Keefe has not had any domestic violence complaints against him. He's not in a domestic relationship with Matthew Tiermond. Matthew Tiermond is merely the person who got James O'Keefe kicked out of Project Veritas. He was a former Project Veritas board member. So James O'Keefe had said that they came in, they served him with this domestic violence restraining order, and this morning at 9:30 was court. If you'll also remember, Matthew Tiermond admitted multiple times on camera that he wanted to kill James O'Keefe. He had also taken a video of using a rifle to shoot James O'Keefe's book, which, of course, has James on the cover. He shot James through the heart. He thought that was very funny. So James went to court this morning, and the judge has apparently extended the restraining order and now ordered James to surrender his firearms. Which is absolutely shocking. Now, of course, James is going to fight this. He said this morning, I just got out of court in Miami. The judge extended the temporary restraining order until May 11th, where there will then be a full ruling. As somebody, I've gone through this process before, and quite literally, it's normal for there's like an initial emergency hearing. and then that typically it does extend the restraining order if it is granted in the first place. I'm surprised, however, that it was granted in the first place. And then when they have the evidentiary hearing and everybody comes together, certainly James O'Keefe is going to have a lot of evidence. It's crazy that they're asking him to surrender his firearms, though. So he said he was filing an emergency interlocutory appeal today. Prior restraint against a newsroom is unconstitutional. You can see Neer versus Minnesota, New York Times versus United States. It's a violation of First and Second Amendment rights. We are filing an anti-SLAPP suit as well, seeking attorney's fees, and we will appeal all the way if necessary. Now, the TRO is also based upon third-party comments. It's not based upon James's reporting. It's actually based on comments that were made towards Matthew Tierman in videos that James and O'Keefe Media Group had produced. It's called a heckler's veto, where the government suppresses or restricts news reporting because of the reaction of an audience. This is regarding our reporting on Matt Tierman. We published a tape of him threatening to kill me. He shot up an image of me on the front of my book with a rifle bullet through my heart, and he bragged about being an SDNY informant. Of course, as you might expect, the comments were angry at Matthew Tierman. He just brought this domestic violence stalking restraining order afterwards in Miami family court against my news organization, and the local judge just signed off. We don't know if Matthew Tierman and this judge have any overt connections, but the series of events is obviously completely ridiculous. However, even though it's April 1st, it's not an April Fool's joke. Now, we've also gotten some movement in the case against Brian Cole Jr. Brian Cole Jr. is the young man, the young autistic man who lives with his parents, or did until he was arrested for supposedly perpetrating the pipe bomb hoax in Washington, D.C. on January 5th and 6th. But Brian Cole Jr.'s lawyers were able to get some Brady material in their request for evidence from the prosecution. Now, it's not nearly as much of a bombshell as some people are making it out to be, and I will tell you why. But Viva Frei believes that it is a bombshell. Now, maybe he's thinking about this from the terms of being an attorney. Certainly, this is going to be evidence that will be presented at trial to perhaps throw some doubt into the minds of the jury that Brian Cole Jr. could not have been the person. It also is leading to the additional requests for discovery from the defense. Now, what is interesting about this document they received is that it alleges on November 6th of last year, Shawnee Kirkhoff, who was the D.C. police officer that was initially suggested to have been the pipe bomber, was actually subjected to a polygraph examination, and she failed. The questions she failed on certainly are interesting. She was asked, did you place those pipe bombs? And did you place those pipe bombs that evening? Now, she failed those questions. And what's also interesting is the response to her being told that she failed the polygraph. Apparently, the FBI said that her reaction seemed to be rehearsed, as if she expected that she might fail that polygraph. Now, you also might find it interesting, as I do, that Shawnee Kirkhoff left the D.C. police and went to work for the Central Intelligence Agency. I find that to be fascinating. So the date of this pipe bomb investigation polygraph taking place is notable because on November 6th, Shawnee gets this polygraph, and then it was apparently 2 days later that Steve Baker's expose was published. So that means that Shawnee Kirkhoff was being considered as a suspect prior to Steve Baker's expose identifying her as the likely suspect in this pipe bomb investigation. I mean, certainly she could have been on the radar of authorities, FBI, prior to Steve having written this article, but undoubtedly his article had been circulated around Washington, D.C. Now, the reason I'm saying that it's not necessarily a bombshell is because polygraphs are not admissible evidence in court, but certainly this sequence of events is admissible, and I'm sure that they're going to go ahead and bring it up. But Shawnee's failure of a polygraph does not immediately indicate that she was the person who placed these pipe bombs. However, there are some things that the defense is asking for, which may indicate that she could be the person who placed those pipe bombs. Now, we can take a look here in the discovery request, and it says that they only found out about the polygraph because the government told them about it. So the FBI gives her the polygraph. They ask her these questions. She fails. And the polygraph examiner noted Kirchhoff's very controlled reaction to the news of her failing the polygraph and seemingly rehearsed responses to the examiner's questions. Now, that is interesting because, of course, if you are just telling the truth, you've got no reason to have rehearsed answers. And if you're telling the truth, then why would you be expecting to fail a polygraph? So on November 7th, this is 5 days before the FBI opened up a file on Mr. Cole, the FBI names Ms. Kirchhoff as a person of interest in the pipe bomb investigation, and they opened up a file on her. So that was 2 days after they had actually given her a polygraph. The government immediately issued subpoenas and preservation requests for numerous electronic accounts associated with Ms. Kirchhoff. Then on November 12th, the same day the government officially opens their investigation into Mr. Cole, FBI agents attempted to question Ms. Kirchhoff and her boyfriend, Mr. Dickert, at her residence. Now, the next day, the FBI interviewed Ms. Kirchhoff's dog walker. The following day, Ms. Kirchhoff and her boyfriend, Dan Dickert, also a Capitol Police officer, were interviewed together by the FBI and the AUSA Ballantine. Throughout November of last year, the FBI interviewed Ms. Kirchhoff's coworkers at the Capitol Police, her neighbors, surveilled her without her knowledge, requested her employment records from the CIA, and sent surveillance footage of her walking to a podiatrist, likely for gait analysis. I found that to be particularly fascinating as well, because much of the evidence that Steve Baker was presenting in that article had everything to do with that gait analysis. And there was a lot of people who kind of shit all over the investigation because they were gait analysis, what does that matter? I've never heard anything about that. Allegedly, they did the same thing with Osama bin Laden, and it appears to be something that they actually do. Mr. Cole, of course, as you might remember, was arrested on December 5th. The FBI closed their surveillance on Ms. Kirchhoff on January 7th, so they continued to surveil her for a month after, even though they had officially stated that she was no longer the suspect. So what they're looking for from Ms. Kirchhoff is essentially the evidence that she presented to the FBI, which apparently exonerates her of the ability to have placed these pipe bombs. There was a video of her with some dogs, and I don't know that you could actually see her in the video, but you could allegedly hear her voice in the background. So Brian Cole and his team are asking for all of the electronic data that the FBI and the AUSA had previously gathered from her, her CIA records, the comments and the interviews that were given by all of her coworkers and the people around her, the neighbor, etc. And I guess there were also some online accounts that were associated with Shawnee Kirchhoff that were deleted. They were wiped. So, of course, that begs the question, what was Shawnee Kirchhoff trying to hide? I mean, in the midst of this investigation into the pipe bomber, if she had nothing to hide, then why is she going and wiping everything about her from the internet? I'm not sure, but it's a question worth asking. And obviously, Mr. Cole's attorneys want to know why as well. So when we get all of these things, I'm sure that Mr. Cole and his legal team are going to be presenting them to the public. And obviously, if the trial does end up being brought against him, then we'll be covering it at that time as well. Thank you to Filter Dog, who says KBJ, which is Ketanji Brown Jackson, is an idiot, and highly suspect that I may have already pulled up this clip to watch with you today, Filter Dog. We'll go ahead and get it pulled up on a different screen, and once we get to that point in the video, we'll go over it. Yes, I definitely have a slightly longer version of this clip. All right, now I also have an update for you. I should have pushed this forward because I talked about Florida already, but we have an update on that Florida judge who released that child predator so that he could go out and murder a 5-year-old girl who was his stepdaughter. So the Florida state legislature is now moving to impeach this judge after she allowed this guy to walk free and essentially created the circumstances under which he could murder a 5-year-old girl that he was already sexually abusing. He was already a convicted sex offender. Let me just put that out there. Now, it's not just Governor DeSantis who mentioned this yesterday. Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier has also formally called on the Florida House to begin these impeachment proceedings against Leon County Circuit Judge Tiffany Baker Carper following the tragic killing of young Missy Mogul. And, of course, yesterday, in case you didn't know, Missy's Law was signed. This ends the practice of letting criminals out when they've been convicted. If they have committed a violent crime, then the judge has the responsibility to keep them in jail and not allow them to go back out onto the streets and to commit additional acts of criminal victimization. So the facts of this case are heart-wrenching, and essentially Missy's stepfather, Daniel Spencer, who was a big-time scumbag, had a long rap sheet. In April of last year, a jury found him guilty of traveling to meet a minor for sex, which, of course, is a felony. Despite the fact he was convicted, despite the pleas of prosecutors and, of course, others in the community warning that Spencer was a danger, Judge Tiffany Baker Carper refused to revoke his bond. So she ignored the warnings, and this man then went out to once again rape and then murder his 5-year-old stepdaughter. It was 1 month later, while he was out on bond. He murdered young Missy. He strangled her to death. Evidence later revealed horrific videos as well of Spencer physically abusing this child. He bound her hands and feet, and then he smothered her with pillows. So this guy is as low as they go, the scum of the earth. And now this judge who is responsible for her death is no longer going to be a judge. So Judge Uthmeier wrote on, Attorney General Uthmeier wrote on X, Judge Tiffany Baker refused to revoke the bond of a convicted pedophile, leading to the murder of Missy Mogul. The Florida House has a duty to hold Judge Baker accountable. I sent a letter to Speaker Perez calling for him to begin impeachment proceedings. Radical judges must not be allowed to endanger our kids. Let this be a lesson to any judges out there down here in Florida that if you are thinking about allowing some criminal scumbag back out on the street when you know how dangerous they are, it's on your hands. The blood of that next victim is on your hands. And I wish that every other state in this union would pay attention to what Florida's doing down here. We're not perfect, all right, but this is something that's long overdue. This needs to happen everywhere. Okay, now, what did I tell you? President Trump leaving NATO. I think this is what he's going to be talking about tonight at 9 p.m. He's going to be addressing the nation. I'm going to be doing color commentary with my friends over on Badlands Media. President Trump will be live at 9 p.m. Eastern. He actually told The Telegraph that he is strongly considering pulling the United States out of NATO. He went even a little bit further than that. He said that, first of all, he always knew that NATO was a paper tiger, never took it very seriously. And then he actually said removing America from the defense treaty is now beyond reconsideration, which means that he's already made up his mind. It's the strongest possible sign yet, on top of everything else I've already brought to you guys, that we no longer regard Europe as a reliable defense partner. And if Europe is not a defense partner, then why should we be putting forth our blood treasure and our citizens to keep them safe when they won't do the same for us? So right now he is preparing this speech. I can only imagine what he's going to say, but I think that this is the thrust of his message today. Now, he was asked if he would reconsider the U.S.'s membership of NATO after the conflict, and he said, oh, yes. I would say it's beyond reconsideration. I was never swayed by NATO. I always knew they were a paper tiger, and Putin knows that too, by the way. Now, partners in NATO have been reluctant to help open the strait through which 20% of the world's oil typically travels. None of that oil is what we consume here in the United States. There have been all of these stories about how the straits are closed, but you look every day and there are boats going through there. So I don't know exactly what's happening in this region, but the long and the short of it is not as much oil is flowing as needs to. Now, President Trump also said, beyond not being there, it was actually hard to believe, and I didn't do a big sale. I just said, hey, I didn't insist too much. I just think it should be automatic in response to various European nations not wanting to assist. He said, we've been there automatically, including Ukraine. Ukraine wasn't our problem. It was a test, and we were there for them, and we would always have been for them there, but they weren't there for us. He also signaled out Keir Starmer. He said, you don't even have a Navy. You're too old, and you had aircraft carriers that didn't work. You suck, basically, is what he said. When asked whether the prime minister should spend more on defense, President Trump said, I'm not going to tell him what to do. He can do whatever he wants. It doesn't matter. All Starmer wants is costly windmills that are driving your energy prices through the roof. So then, after speaking with the Telegraph, the Wall Street Journal approached that President Trump had raised the issue of withdrawing from NATO with White House aides. So the paper said he made these statements to Marco Rubio and others in private, but at that point, he had not made a full decision. Following those statements, Keir Starmer actually went and did a live address on UK television, and he, of course, talked up NATO and how great it is and why the United States shouldn't leave. He said, it is the single most effective military alliance the world has ever seen. And, of course, he signaled that he would love to have a closer relationship with Europe in response to the souring of relations with Washington. And he said, whatever the noise, he would act in the British interest. This is not our war, and we are not going to get dragged into it. And so here we are, waiting for 9 p.m. tonight because I think that Trump is going to pull us out of NATO, which is the best thing that we could possibly do. We're wasting a lot of money keeping all those countries safe. Now, President Trump has also revealed that Iran has asked for a ceasefire. But, of course, there are conditions that must be met. And that one condition is essentially they got to open the Straits of Hormuz because, obviously, we're not going to be there much longer. President Trump also said that we expect to be out of there in maybe a week, maybe 2, maybe 3. It doesn't seem like it's going to go on very long. Had a lot of people asking me, do you think we're going to send ground troops to Iran? No, I still don't think we're going to send ground troops to Iran. That's not going to happen. President went on Truth Social yesterday, and he said that Iran's new president has just asked America for a ceasefire to end the fighting. He also said he's considering the proposal, but the one condition is they've got to open the Hormuz Strait, which the nation closed last month. Otherwise, the bombing will continue. And then, of course, he's got this address tonight where we're probably going to talk about the situation in Iran as well. He also said Iran's new regime president, much less radicalized and far more intelligent than his predecessors, has just asked the United States of America for a ceasefire. We will consider when the Hormuz Strait is open, free, and clear. Until then, we are blasting Iran into oblivion, or as they say, back to the Stone Ages. Just love the way he talks. It's so funny. And he said, we won't be there for much longer, but we've got more work to do in terms of killing their whatever offensive capabilities they have left. And so President Trump signaling that, yes, no more trips to Germany for the troops. That's correct. Also, the president of Iran has written a letter to the people of the United States. It's actually 4 pages. I'm not going to read the entire thing. I've got a summation of it right here. But these are the key points. He says, number 1, Iran harbors no enmity towards other nations, and that includes the people of America, Europe, or neighboring countries. That's a good thing, obviously, because we want to make sure that there's not going to be any future hostilities. Number 2, recent U.S. actions are aggression, targeting civilians and infrastructure, setting up for long-term global instability. I would take issue with that, only because Iran had a history of placing civilian infrastructure with military infrastructure. You see it a lot in the Muslim world, I'll be really honest with you. And it happens in smaller countries. Israel does it too. Middle Eastern countries, you've got a little bit of space and usable land, and they tend to put all of these things right on top of each other. It doesn't make a lot of sense because obviously you are looking at potentially having civilian casualties when you are hitting a military installation that is right next to it. Freedom76, thank you so much for gifting those 5 subscriptions to viewers of the channel. I appreciate it. He also said that what Iran has done and continues to do is a measured response grounded in legitimate self-defense. I don't really have anything to say. I don't think that's incorrect, basically. The decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal was made by the U.S. government. It sure was. Iran having nuclear weapons, that was a red line. President Trump has said that for decades. The decision, continuing along the path of confrontation is more costly and futile than ever before, which is why we are ending hostilities. Now, he also concluded by saying the choice between confrontation and engagement is both real and consequential. Throughout its millennia and proud history, Iran has outlasted many aggressors. It's true, they have been a society for pretty much longer than most people or most countries on Earth. Let's see. Nancy K. Reese says, I don't think Trump can pull out of NATO without a 2/3 Senate vote. Well, let's actually look that up. Can Trump pull out of NATO? Yes, the president of the United States can withdraw from NATO as the legal process for a member state to leave is outlined in Article 13 of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So it does not require a 2/3 vote from the Senate. But Nancy, thank you for the rant. I appreciate you. All right, so we await President Trump's public statements tonight at 9 p.m. Now, President Trump has also gone and demanded that the Senate GOP and the House GOP get together and fund the entirety of DHS. They're, of course, still demanding that the Senate terminate the filibuster. He's also given a deadline of June 1st for all of Congress to fully pass the funding of DHS, which, of course, must include ICE and CBP. So the House of Representatives had received that Senate-backed bill, which strangely left out ICE and CBP, also didn't have the SAVE Act included along with it. And President Trump had said it's a shame. Republicans in the Senate are playing too soft. They should terminate the filibuster. He's only a couple of votes short, but that's what being a leader is. John Thune is not really a leader. He is merely a wolf in sheep's clothing. So President Trump said, we need this to get done. We are going forward to fund our incredible ICE agents and Border Patrol through a process that doesn't need radical left Democrat votes and bypasses the Senate filibuster, which should be repealed immediately. And it was said that he was working in close conjunction with House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Leader John Thune. We are going to work as fast and as focused as possible to replenish funding for our border and ICE agents, and the radical left Democrats won't be able to stop us. We will not allow them to hurt the families of these great patriots by defunding them. I am asking for that bill to be on my desk no later than June 1st. Our law enforcement officers and the American people should not have to wait until the Democrats see reason or learn the hard way through the polls. Hopefully everyone will be voting Republican for the midterms through simple unification. Republicans can do this without the Democrats. The American people should use this opportunity to reflect on the tens of millions of illegal aliens, including many violent criminals such as murderers, rapists, human traffickers, child molesters, and more, that Joe Biden and the far-left liberal Democrat cronies in Congress, led by Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, invited and allowed into our country for the 4 years before I took office, President Trump said. These radical, weak, and incompetent Democrats have made clear that if they resume power, they will never again provide funding to secure our border or enforce our immigration laws. He had a much larger statement, but I'm not going to read the entire thing. Now, you may be asking, what is that methodology that President Trump makes mention of? You know, how are we going to do this? Oh, shit. Hold on. Oh, my screen just stopped working and then it came back. How are we going to do it if we don't have to have the votes of the Democrats? Well, luckily for us, Thune and Johnson put out a joint statement, and it would appear, oh, Anarchist Owl, what a good man. Good to see you, my friend. How you been? Hoot hoot, sorry I can't spend more. You do catch every show. I just haven't seen you around, buddy. I assumed you were working. Saw that you liked my post. I didn't know that I hadn't liked the post the first time. I retweeted it like 2 years ago when you made it for me. Did you see the rap I made for Snape? Still, I saw a rap that was made about Snape. I played it on OnlyLans the other night. If that was you, was it the Black Snape rap? Because if that was you, I was cracking up, dude. No, I'll go to your account. Either way, still here, just have no life right now. I went from web to hardware dev. Okay, sweet, dude. Well, I'm glad that you are working, and I'm glad that everything's going good in your life. At the very least, being busy with work is a worthwhile pursuit. It's a lot better than just sitting around and doing nothing. All right, so here is what they're going to do. Essentially, the House is going to vote on the already passed Senate resolution, which doesn't include funding for ICE and CBP. And then they send it back to the Senate, and then the Senate puts the funding back into the bill using the process for for appropriation. Oh shoot, what is it called again? Whatever. It's the process that we were talking about previously that has to do with the bill, the funding on the bill. Hold on, now I'm going crazy because I can't remember the term. Is it appropriations? Is it the appropriations? Okay. Yes, it's the appropriations process and reconciliation. That's it. Yep. Okay. So all of it will be included. It's just they went about it in a really gay manner. It was the Blape rap. There's two of them. It's pinned currently. Okay, I will find that. Anarchist Owl. And there you are. Okay. All right, buddy. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. You know the thing. Okay. Oh, this is...
Be mine.
Hold on just a second. This looks so real. This might get me a... Oh, my God. You guys. He also made one for Kristi Noem's husband. Hold on. Oh, this is too good. Oh my God. Claire Cat says they're going to rug pull us on this. If they rug pull us on this, then President Trump isn't going to sign it. They will not be able to do anything for the remainder of his term. So, according to President Trump, this deal was struck with his involvement. And if they completely screw us, they're also going to be completely screwing him. And I don't think that they're going to do it. I think that they wanted President Trump to force the issue because Thune is a coward. All right, here is the Snape rap. You don't like it, Logan? Okay. Here we go. Okay. You don't think it's funny that Kristi Noem's husband got caught being a deviant? I find it to be pretty funny.
You killed Dumbledore, Severus. While you live, the Elder Wand cannot truly be mine. You've been a good and faithful servant, Severus. But only I can live forever.
Yeah.
Blape.
Yeah. It's still your dog, Blake. Death Eater Supreme. I got you your one, cause I know you like that sort of thing. Killed Dumbledore clean, made the whole school scream. Double agent dreams, fed you every scheme. I put in that work, marked my arm for the team. Spying on the order, kept the Dark Lord on the beam. Gave your Potter's location, played the long game supreme. Now you finna kill me after all this bling bling bling.
Oh, I feel terrible for Kristi and her family. Of course. I've said that so many times, but I still find humor in the situation. I mean, just come on, like really look at it objectively. That's all that I'm saying.
I brought you to fear, made the wizard world lean, held the wand in your hand, that's the ultimate dream. Protected the boy like you said, stayed unseen. My Lord V-Dog, I deserve to stay on the scene. Yeah, I've been riding for you, never folded to play. All this loyalty don't take my life away. I didn't do nothing wrong, I just ran the game. Let me keep breathing, V-Dog in Voldemort's name.
Okay. My daughter was a huge Harry Potter fan. Yeah, and okay. Yeah, I feel like maybe people take things a little bit too seriously. Yeah, I guess that's really all I can say about it. It's a tragic situation, but unfortunately, if you don't find something to laugh at, then it's only sadness and betrayal. And hopefully Christy is going to recover. Hopefully she's also going to get a divorce and she can get on with her life and maybe find somebody who loves her who's a real man. All right, now, also, wonderful news in regards to addressing the fraud problem here in the United States. We had the signing in ceremony of Colin McDonald today. He is now the Deputy Attorney General for the Anti-Fraud Division at the Department of Justice. And we're going to hear from J.D. Vance at that swearing-in ceremony, and then we're going to hear from Colin McDonald as well. Yes, apparently Eric Q. Freeman, it is a requirement to be a degenerate freak. But here's the thing. Her husband does not serve in public office. So I think that it's a requirement to be a degenerate freak if you work in Washington, D.C., or you live in Washington, D.C. Now, here's the other thing. The reason that I feel like it's perfectly acceptable to make fun of it is because I hope that people like that stay away from any type of public service. Like, do your wife a favor. If you're going to be the kind of person who engages in that behavior, just get a divorce. Like, don't do it. Don't do it in the first place. Don't be a degenerate, and nobody will laugh at you. All right, real quick before we continue, very brief message from our friends over here on Rumble. What was that noise that I just heard right there? All right, parents, grandparents, we got some real talk for just a moment. America is about to hit a major milestone. That is the 250th birthday of our beautiful country. 250 years of freedom, grit, sacrifice, and the greatest experiment in self-governance that the world has ever seen. This is the perfect moment to help your kids and grandkids understand why this country matters. Not just the fireworks and the hot dogs, but the story behind it all. There's a free guide called The Kid's Guide to America's 250th Birthday, and it is honestly a great way to introduce kids to how America began, who those founding fathers were, what it was that they risked, why the ideas they fought for still matter today. This guide is going to send your kids back to the moment when those brave men signed the Declaration of Independence, knowing full well that they were risking their lives for freedom. It breaks it down in a way that kids can actually understand, but most importantly, enjoy. It's not going to water it down, make it into boring schoolwork. They will truly be engrossed in the story of the founding of our country. And if you care about raising kids who know where this country came from, why it's worth preserving, this is something that you're going to want to grab. The best part, it's completely free with this special offer. You only pay $2 for shipping and postage. To find out how you do this, go to freeusabirthday.com. That is freeusabirthday.com. And the Kid's Guide to America's 250th Birthday is there for your kids today, because America's story matters. Make sure that the next generation knows it. You can also use that QR code that you see on screen. Thank you very much to the good folks over there at Rumble. And thank you very much to Freya and boys. Well, there goes half my shit. Meaning that you're going to have to get a divorce. Oh, man, I hope that's not the case. Either way, just, live a godly life as much as you can. Stay off the internet in regards to certain things, and you'll probably find that you have a much more enriching life. Family, work, service, and you don't have to worry about getting exposed on the internet. Let's take a listen to J.D. Vance and his comments about the brand new anti-fraud division.
And this is really a great American mission. As Andrew said, our entire social safety net, our entire idea of neighbors helping out neighbors, of Americans helping out Americans, is premised on the idea that only the people who really need these programs get them. And that when the American taxpayer sends money to a program, it goes to somebody in their community who has the legal right to be here, who has the legal right to actually benefit from these programs. If you don't do that, the whole
Well, AOB, President Trump has already withdrawn us from a number of treaties using that very specific power. So Yeah, I don't think we have to worry about getting pulled out of NATO. Nobody's going to stop us. Well, somebody will probably sue. Let's be honest. There will probably be a lawsuit. It'll lose on appeal. Maybe it'll go to the Supreme Court. But in the meantime, President Trump will just stop spending money, and he might just pull people out as we're waiting for the final say-so.
Thing falls apart. Our sense of social trust, our sense of belonging, our sense that we help each other out, but we help out the people in our community, not the fraudsters who are getting rich off of our generosity. That whole thing falls apart unless we take fraud seriously, and that's what Colin is going to do. And one of the things that Colin has talked to me about and that I've been kind of shocked by, even though we've been sort of living this anti-fraud mission for the past couple of months, is that when you have fraud being committed in this country, the Department of Justice has largely turned a blind eye towards it if it's under a certain dollar amount. One of the things Colin is going to do is make sure that no fraud, no matter how big or how small it is, no fraud is small enough or big enough to look away from. And I think that's going to reimpose deterrence. It's going to make fraudsters know that they're going to suffer some consequences, and it's going to make the American people know that these programs are being protected for the people who need them, because there are a lot of them out there. We want to help them, but we've got to get rid of the fraud in order to do it. So without further ado, what we're going to do is I'm going to swear Colin in. We're going to take some photos, and then I think Colin, actually, we'll swear Colin in, Colin will say a few words, and then we'll take some photos afterwards. So thank you all for...
All right, so the thrust of that. Yesterday, J.D. Vance, well, I played a clip from J.D. Vance where he said that essentially fraud under a certain level had basically was not being prosecuted. If it was less than $1 million, they didn't bother prosecuting it. I'll tell you what, $1 million is a lot of money. It's small potatoes when you look at the entirety of the U.S. budget and the expenditures that the government is putting out there. But it's a lot of money, and it obviously adds up. People knew that they could grift a certain amount of money. They could defraud the United States to a certain degree, and nothing would happen to them. Well, that's over. Those rules have been removed, and quite literally, no fraud is too big, no fraud is too small. Colin McDonald and the new anti-fraud division at the Department of Justice is going after all of it. All right, so I see people questioning about J.D. Vance. I think Little Peachy said, what do you think about J.D. and his book deal? I do not think that everyone who writes a book received a payoff from the deep state. I think it's a method for the deep state to give people big payoffs. But you look at what J.D. did before he got that book deal and he wrote his story. Number one, it's a compelling story. Number two, the guy came from nothing. Number three, he was not a politician or anybody important before that. And number four, I don't think that J.D. Vance is working against President Trump. I think that the people that President Trump chose to be around him in this second administration were chosen with intention. I think that the people who have perhaps gone against the president or stepped out of line, they've been reshuffled somewhere else. Just because somebody screws up once doesn't mean that they're completely no longer trustworthy. I trust that President Trump has brought these people together for a reason, and I don't think that J.D. Vance is working against the president or his interests.
Thank you all for being here today. This is an important day for the United States of America and for the Department of Justice. And to begin, I want to say some words to some select groups of people that have made today possible.
Well, and I also see I pray JD is a good guy, Donald says. Don and cookies. So, I mean, can you think of anything that JD has done in the second administration that would indicate to you at all that he wasn't a good guy? Or can you think of anything at all? Because I can't. I mean, and I'm paying attention on a daily basis. And when I see people doing things that go against the president, I'm definitely taking note. But I don't see that. And what I do see is that President Trump has given J.D. Vance this responsibility, which is very important. He's the fraud czar. He put together a methodology and a team to go after fraud. The proof is going to be in the pudding, whether or not it's successful. I see no reason why it wouldn't be. There's plenty of fraud. All we needed was people to go out there and actually pursue it.
First, I want to start with a word of thanks to the President, to the Vice President, to Mr. Ferguson, to the Attorney General, to the Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Blanche, for having the vision to create this new division to ensure that the American taxpayer is protected and to ensure that there.
Yes, Vance was against Trump at first. A lot of people were against Trump at first. And then they came around because they realized that their ego and their assumed level of intelligence was not greater than President Trump's.
There is confidence in our financial security within the United States. A hearty thank you goes out to those visionaries for creating the division that we are launching today.
Colin is married with children. He's a little soft-spoken, but I don't know anything about his personal activities, but he is married with children.
Next, to my teammates led by Deputy Attorney General Blanche and Attorney General Bondi, I thank you for the work that we have achieved together to ensure the safety and prosperity of America over the last year. Your hard work does not go unnoticed. Even while the people of America may not get to see it, they are sleeping well at night because you are not sleeping at all at night, tending to the public safety mission of the United States of America. To the American people, my promise to you is this, that I will work tirelessly day after day to ensure that if someone out there dares to steal your taxpayer dollars, that there might just be a federal prosecutor on the end of that bad decision, that no longer will we be uninterested in low levels of fraud. We will be interested in all of it. And if someone out there right now is deciding and determining whether they will file a false application to try to steal your taxpayer dollars, we're going to care about it. And we're going to find it. And we are going to prosecute you as hard as we can. What is the goal of this division? The goal of this division is to ensure deterrence so that people who are right now being dishonest and stealing the hard-earned taxpayer money, that they make right decisions, that they are deterred. That is what justice is for, to ensure right and honest and good conduct. That is what the mission of this division is. And finally, to my family in front of me, this task that Daddy is embarking on is a big, big task. But it is not bigger than my task with you. You are my biggest task. And the devotion that I have for you will be the same devotion that I give to the people of the United States to fight for them, to ensure that they have the confidence that their government is doing the right thing, to identify fraud, and to prosecute those and bring justice to those who are perpetrating against it. That is my message to my children here today. And to all the rest of us, it is time to get to work. I am grateful for this opportunity to work on behalf of the United States, and I'm thankful for the confidence that the Vice President and the President has given and placed in me, and I look forward to honoring that confidence by doing the best job possible. Thank you.
Okay, I like him, okay? And obviously, first impressions don't necessarily tell you everything, but from everything that I've done to research Colin's experience, I feel he is the right man for the job. I feel that obviously he was chosen for this purpose for a reason. And I also think that it is far too early to start worrying about who we're going to be voting for in 2028. We've got a lot of problems that are right in front of us, and that is pretty much where I'm focused on. I'm not going to be speculating personally about who's going to be running, who the candidates are going to be, what should be happening in 2028. That's all going to sort itself out. And believe me, President Trump is going to tell you who he believes the heir apparent to MAGA and America First is. That is all coming down the line. But right now, I am hyper-focused on what is happening in front of us at this very moment. I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. I feel that the right oftentimes gets caught up in these cycles of 2 and 4 years. People get so focused on the midterms, then they get focused on the following election after that. And I think oftentimes that's how they've been able to just kind of like slip all of these things past us. All of this terrible stuff happens in Washington because we're focused on the next election, on the next election, on the next election. That will all come eventually. But right now, we got to fix the fraud and we got to fix the criminality in Washington, D.C. today. That, to me, is the most important thing. So don't worry too much about it is all I'm saying. Emerald Dragon says, I can solve the fraudulent use of taxpayer dollars in one move, abolish taxes. And I truly agree with you, and I believe that's exactly where we're going. Of course, we've got to get through the issues that are currently facing President Trump and the administration in the courts with regards to the tariffs. But eventually, in the not too distant future, I see the golden age as truly dawning, not only here in America, but all around the world. And I think that the more fraud that we expose, the more we deem it unnecessary to continue taxing people, because so much of it is just going back into individuals' pockets, into politicians' pockets, into political action committees. So this is all part of the same conversation that we're having right now. Speaking of fraud, auditors have just discovered a fraudulent scheme similar to what we saw in Minneapolis at another school district, and this time it's in Memphis, Tennessee, the Shelby County school system. Interesting that we started with state and local government, and then in Los Angeles, moved down to the Los Angeles Unified School District. Now we've got a similar thing happening here in Shelby County. Significant contractors apparently were getting contracts, but they didn't even have addresses, which means that there's no way to track them down. The millions in fraud, waste, and abuse that have just been uncovered have already gone out there into the world, and they apparently have pretty much no way to track it. They're not even fully done yet, and they have discovered a staggering amount of money missing. They're about 25% of the way through this audit. And wouldn't you guess, the school board is 100% run by Democrats. There's not a single Republican on this board. So it is bad. Every time we take a look at some local or state jurisdiction that is controlled by Democrats, we see a similar behavior pattern every single time. Democrats equal fraud. Of course, it's not perfect with Republicans either. The uniparty is very real, but it's unfortunate. We have to believe and understand the pattern recognition. Unfortunately, Democrats have a larger propensity for fraud than most anybody else. No thanks, Joe. He says, thank you so much, Lisa and Zach. I continue to enjoy your reporting for at least a portion of every single weekday. Well, thank you for being here, Joe. God bless and be safe. Darla, the way the Supreme Court acted today was anyone can come here on vacation or illegally pop out a baby, and boom, they're now a citizen. Unbelievable ignorance. So one thing that I have noticed in watching many different Supreme Court arguments, oral arguments, is that sometimes even the justices who agree with the position of the federal government, they will ask questions seeking to challenge the rationale of the plaintiff, which is the U.S. government in this case, because they want them to be very clear about the legal rationale for what they're asking for. So I agree with you. There did appear to be pushback from a number of SCOTUS justices on the idea of banning birthright citizenship. But in asking those tough questions, it gets people to a position where they can make their case even better. So I don't think all hope is lost. However, there are definitely ignorant people sitting on the Supreme Court of the United States. Another fraudulent scheme, this time in another Democrat-run hellhole, Newark, New Jersey, also a school district. Now over $250 million federal dollars were surged into this district. It was meant to address learning loss, but it basically had no impact. The person receiving this money got a no-show contract, and they were also a close friend of an assistant superintendent at the Newark Public Schools. This is now the second or third story related to fraud and federal funding in Newark schools. We've spoken about them on a number of occasions. So funds have flown to a so-called literary consultant, partly using federal dollars. After 1 year of this money being handed over, there has not been a single measurable piece of work. Money is being blown on things that had little to nothing to do with student outcomes. No academic improvement, no student support. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Let's take a listen.
More money keeps getting spent. Student outcomes just keep getting worse. She details her concerns in a letter she wrote to Education Secretary Linda McMahon.
Money is being blown on things that have little to nothing to do with student outcomes, academic improvement, and student support. I think when I say this is the tip of the iceberg, I'm really hopeful for stronger federal oversight.
That's State Assemblywoman Dawn Fantasia. She says Newark Public Schools received about $287 million in COVID relief funds meant to address learning loss. But while nearly 16,000 students were recommended for tutoring, she says less than 2,000 actually received help. And Fantasia points to one contract approved by Newark Public Schools with a literary consultant for $1.4 million, partly using federal COVID funds. But her letter to the Department of Education says 1 year later, the work never began.
This person received the no-show contract, and this person was a close friend of an assistant superintendent of Newark Public Schools. So it runs very, very deep.
And there's been a long history of questions over Newark's school spending. Years ago, you might remember, after Mark Zuckerberg donated $100 million to help the district, a large portion reportedly went to a lengthy list of consultants. Just last week, Newark's school board approved its largest budget yet, more than $1.6 billion, partially offset with state aid, and that will raise taxes there. We have reached out to Newark Public Schools to ask about the Assemblywoman's letter. So far, we have not received a response. Sandra?
All right, well, we'll wait and see, I guess.
President Trump, apparently at the White House, just made a comment about
Thank you very much.
What tonight's speech is going to be about.
Tonight I'm making a little speech at 9 o'clock. And basically, I'm going to tell everybody how great I am. What a great job I've done. What a phenomenal job. What a phenomenal job I've done. But seriously, if you didn't have me, if you had some different type of a president, you wouldn't have Israel. I know you're big Israel fans. Frankly, tonight I'm...
Oh my God, I love POTUS. That's so fun. Oh, Pagan Patriot, what's up, homie? He says, hey, Zach, any word on Missy Cole's mom? Where was she with that little girl's torture? P.S. Sorry, I'm driving. So I have not heard anything specific about her mom. She certainly hasn't been charged with anything. And from everything I've read, she appears to have been a victim in this as well. If there was any indication that Missy Cole's mom was culpable in her daughter's death, I am certain that it would have been talked about. But, I mean, the poor woman has got to be absolutely beside herself. I mean, you know, it's probably the worst situation that you could imagine. Oh, God, I love President Trump so much. All right, now... President Trump announced that he was going to sit in on oral arguments today when the Solicitor General John Sauer was arguing in favor of President Trump's executive order. Now, House Representative Susie Lee, she's a Democrat from Nevada. She went on Twitter and she went onto a foul-mouthed tirade, apparently, because she's so upset that President Trump was making this historic decision. Now, a lot of people were also saying on X that, oh, this is unprecedented. The president shouldn't be anywhere near the SCOTUS. He's going to, I guess maybe influence their decision or something like that. But what those people didn't actually know is that the Supreme Court has always had one chair reserved for the President of the United States. There are a number of chairs that are reserved for certain dignitaries, and the president's chair is always open. The president at any administration at any time could come and sit in on SCOTUS oral arguments, but just nobody else has ever done it before. So President Trump did that. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But after this Democrat rep learned that President Trump was going to be making this move to come on in, Representative Susie Lee went on X and replied to somebody and said, so effing effed up. I pray they F him to his face. And then she said, sorry, I say F a lot these days. So she clearly must be worried about President Trump actually influencing the SCOTUS, but that's not likely to happen. She later deleted the tweet, but a lot of people were able to screenshot it. Now let's take a look at the text of the 14th Amendment. because this is what it's all about. In the order, it is the policy of the United States that no department or agency of the United States government shall issue documents recognizing United States citizenship or accept documents issued by state, local, or other governments or authorities purporting to recognize United States citizenship to persons, number one, when the person's mother was unlawfully present in the United States and the person's father was not a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of said person's birth. Pretty clear right there. Or number two, when that person's mother's presence in the United States was lawful but temporary, and the person's father was not a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of said person's birth. Now, of course, President Trump has also made his own rationale as to why he has passed this executive order and why he is demanding that the 14th Amendment specifically exclude illegal aliens from having anchor babies, because the 14th Amendment was never interpreted to extend citizenship universally to everyone born within the United States. 14th Amendment has always excluded from birthright citizenship persons who were born in the United States but not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And that particular turn of phrase is very important. We'll talk about it when we go through the clips from the oral arguments. Consistent with this understanding, the Congress has further specified through legislation that a person born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof is a national and citizen of the United States at birth, 18 U.S.C. 1401, generally mirroring the 14th Amendment's text. So let's take a look at what we need to worry about. We have all of these illegal aliens in the United States, and in order to address the problem, many people were hoping that if SCOTUS found in favor of the federal government in President Trump's executive order, that it would potentially get rid of a lot of people. It may go back and retroactively strip citizenship of people who are anchor babies. One thing that came out in the oral arguments today is that no, that's not actually the case. That's not what the government is asking for. They're asking for an order that is in place from here forth. So anybody who thinks they could have an anchor baby from this point forward, if they have not received citizenship yet, regardless of the language having been explicit, in my opinion and in the government's opinion previously, those people are not going to be affected. So it leaves us with a question of all of these people who are illegal right now and how we go about fully stripping these people of their presence here in the United States. President Trump had previously promised that we were going to engage in the largest mass deportation effort in history. We have done that up until this point, but for many people, it's not enough. Now, Data Republican is working with the Oversight Project, and they've put together a plan that they are presenting to President Trump. And this is a coalition that's made up of congressional advisors, immigration officials, lawyers, and in the case of Data Republican, a data analyst. And they have just published their mass deportation playbook. You can get the whole thing online and read through it yourself, but we're going to go through the highlights. It's basically just a common sense, cost-effective set of policies that President Trump's administration can implement right now and begin the process. Several of these we've talked about here on the show before. But in order to achieve this, they say, fewer than 350,000 deportations in year one, only 72,000 self-departures via CBP home. Self-deportation isn't working at the scale that was promised. The target that they have is 1 million deportations in 2026. And here is how we achieve it. First of all, what I've suggested, debanking, and this is something the administration has been hinting at rather recently. They can revise post 9/11 KYC, which is Know Your Customer regulations, to bar anyone who can't prove legal status from holding a U.S. bank account. They're also blocking remittances. We could notify landlords, lenders, and state benefit agencies. Illegal aliens are now no longer allowed to receive Section 8. So there's a number of these things which are kind of layering on themselves. But we can increase the fines. $998 per day. There's an existing law which is not actually being enforced that imposes these $998 per day civil fines on anyone who refuses to leave after that final removal order. I've done a couple of stories in the past where some people have received notice from the government that they need to pay because they've been here for too long. I think there was a woman that I reported on who who had like over $1 million in fines because she'd been here for like 20 years. But the playbook says start enforcing it. Place liens on their property. This is also important. If we take people who are not citizens, who have bank accounts, seize the bank accounts. Seize the money in those bank accounts. If they've bought a house, seize the house. Auction that house off. Do whatever we need to do to collect on the money that they would owe because they've been here long after their order of removal. You can also seize vehicles, bank accounts, tools, remittance money. They could use fraud and identity theft as the legal hook and then make self-deportation the rational financial choice. It would just be that these people find it easier to send themselves home rather than having to deal with taking all of the stuff from them. Also, of course, using the IRS. This is one reason why maybe the IRS is sticking around. You can move SSA's, the Social Security Administration's no-match letter to the IRS. If an employer doesn't fire the unverified worker within 90 days, IRS should then audit 7 years of wages. And, of course, ICE should show up and arrest those illegals. And I think that the business that is hiring illegal aliens, I've said this on so many occasions, they need to be held criminally responsible. Selective service. All males of 18 to 26 must register for the draft, and that includes illegal aliens. If you fail to register for selective service, you're then eligible for up to 5 years in prison, a $250,000 fine, and of course, you can be deported. So the selective service has zero data on compliance. When is the last time you heard of anybody getting arrested for not registering for selective service? I certainly have never heard about illegal aliens not getting arrested. And I would hazard a guess and say that the people who are here illegally are not bothering to register for the draft. They can start prosecuting those people, enforcing the law as it exists. Reform the asylum system. This is something that the administration is currently in the midst of doing. But 63% of the 3.8 million court backlogs is for asylum cases. A government sample found only 30% of cases had zero fraud indicators, which meant that most of them seem to have some indication of fraud. 12% of those cases do have confirmed fraud. 58% showed indications of fraud. And so this playbook calls for the AI screening of all applicants in the asylum system. You've also got 287G, which is local enforcement. Agreements can be made, as has been done down here in Florida between ICE and local police. That's up 641% since January of 2025. But outside of Florida, average red state participation is only about 6.5%. Big room for improvement there. Now, if you want to check out this entire package, you can follow their Twitter account at Phase 2 Deport, PHASE 2 Deport, and that is the Mass Deportation Coalition. It's a good place to go. They've got a lot of great information, and they put all of their executive summary of recommendations together in a nice, easy-to-read document. And there's even a couple of more in there that I didn't go over. They also have a whole list of coalition partners. These are groups, political and otherwise, that they're already working with to try to spearhead this. All of the people who are helping out with the various plans that they're putting together are parts of those groups. So what I'm going to do is share the link to this tweet. If you guys are on Twitter, I would suggest Zach only unplugs on weekends. That's correct. I only unplug on weekends because there's too much going on. Dibs, thank you for sharing the show over on X. In case anybody didn't know, I can see when people share the show on X, and I am always very appreciative of people who do that because that does help out. I am totally shadow banned on X, even though I've got my account back. Okay. All right. Now, next. Oh, you know what? I'll share this over on YouTube as well. There you go, YouTube. You guys can go ahead. All right. Now, so what happened? President Trump showed up. He was there, first time ever a sitting president has physically been present inside SCOTUS oral arguments. Obviously, this is a very important case. This is a watershed moment. If the administration is successful, it means the American people are successful. The case is known as Trump versus Barbara or Barbara. And this is the first time that any president showed up. President Trump got to sit right in front. It is the ACLU that are actually pleading with the justices to leave this loophole open, even though it does not align with the language of the amendment or any statutes that have come after that. President Trump said, "I have listened to this argument for so long. And this is not about Chinese billionaires who are billionaires from other countries who all of a sudden have 75 children or 59 children in one case or 10 children becoming American citizens. This was about slaves. And if you take a look, slaves were talking about slaves from the Civil War. And if you take a look at when it was filed, all of this legislation, all of this, everything had to do with birthright citizenship. It was at the end of the Civil War. Now, the reason was it had to do with the babies of slaves and the protection of the babies of slaves. It didn't have anything to do with the protection of multimillionaires and billionaires wanting to have their children get American citizenship. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. It's been so badly handled by legal people over the years. If you look at the original birthright citizenship papers, that all happened after the Civil War. And the reason was the babies of slaves. Hopefully, it's going to stay because our country is being scammed. We're getting all of these people. They're selling the rights to them. What he's specifically referring to here are the hundreds of Chinese birther tourism companies who literally send pregnant women here. They will even have Chinese parents give birth by surrogacy in the bodies of American women. The babies will be born here. They will get American citizenship, and then they go back to China. They're raised in China. Maybe they come back here to go to school, but then they can come here as adults and basically act as Chinese spies. And anybody in any nation can do this. Primarily, though, it seems to be abused by illegal aliens coming across the border, dropping an anchor baby, getting that baby some type of American citizenship, and then, of course, they take advantage of the American system. So here's a little more history on the 14th Amendment, and this is Mark McCatherine. I've never seen this guy before, but I thought this post was great. I'm reminded that a lot of people... Oh, wait, hold on. Frey and the Boy said, Zach, have you seen this? Go to Ingersoll Lockwood. Yes, I've seen... I did a report on IngersollLockwood.com years ago when the website first came up. What do I think about it? I think it's a website that somebody made because they knew that there was buzz around the books and Ingersoll Lockwood as an author. I don't think that there is anything special about it other than the fact that somebody has created a website that they got traction on and they've been doing it on purpose. I don't think it's like from the administration or anything or anybody with any inside information. All right. Now, again, I'm reminded that a lot of people do not know the process involved in bringing an amendment from concept to ratification in law or why the process even matters. Jacob Howard in the Senate and John Bingham in the House. These were the original two guys that drafted and presented the proposed amendment to Congress, the 14th Amendment. Once they submitted it, there is debate. Members of Congress express concerns, propose changes, and so on. These debates are recorded for posterity, and then they look back upon them to better understand what the legislation was intended to do. And then in this particular instance, you'll hear this in the oral arguments, the frame of mind that the writers of this amendment were having at the time that they put it together and where the debate was centered around, what questions were being asked at the time. Once Congress passes an amendment like this and then passes it to the states, there's the ratification process where each state can debate and present their own concerns. This leaves us with a huge record, tremendous amount of information, why specific words and phrases were chosen, what the intent of the writers were. It informs the voters on exactly what the law means, straight from the framers of it, so that there's no confusion. The only problem is now we seem to have a lot of confusion because the language in this amendment and the way words are used in the modern world seem to be being oftentimes forgotten. They've been changed. And of course, like the lawyers for the ACLU They may have a fundamental misunderstanding about what these things are intended to do, or they may intentionally try to obscure the original meanings of them. This is why originalism is preferred to textualism. The law can only mean what is meant when it was adopted. Altering the meaning and intent of the law means altering the law itself, and it subverts the legislative process. Courts do not have that power, despite what these courts will tell you. Sadly, that hasn't stopped courts from usurping that power. In the ratification process, the very questions being argued before SCOTUS today were addressed unequivocally. When asked if the amendment applies to foreigners, the framers have already answered this question. They stated explicitly, this is Howard, this amendment declares that all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. But then he immediately defines the limitation on that statement. This will not, of course, include persons born in the United States who are foreigners, aliens, or who belong to the families of ambassadors or foreign ministers. In his original framing of this amendment, he specifically excluded aliens, illegal aliens. And I have to say, I believe this is why the left and the Democrats have so vociferously attempted to get people to stop using the phrase illegal aliens, because that is a legal classification of people. They want to call them immigrants. They want to call them travelers. They want to call them visitors. Of course, those things don't hold any legal weight, but alien carries with it history, tradition, and, of course, an interpretation that is unequivocal. This is the understanding of the law as it was ratified. That is what we, the people, voted to enact. This was the understanding when this amendment went from the House and the Senate and then traveled around to all of the states at that time for it to be ratified. Furthermore, they went even deeper on what the subject to jurisdiction explicitly meant. Howard also described jurisdiction as full and complete jurisdiction, not owing allegiance to anybody else. Anybody else would be something outside of the United States of America. Allegiance, that was the crux of the debate and the understanding. For those born here from citizens of another nation, another quote, they are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States in a certain sense, but not in the full and complete sense. Also from Howard, full and complete. That's what makes someone subject to the jurisdiction. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof means not owing allegiance to anybody else. That was a quote from Senator Lynn Trumbull at the ratification debates. They explicitly rejected absolute jus soli, that is citizen by soil alone. That was rejected during the ratification process. In the case of United States versus Wong Kim Ark, which you will hear them reference in the oral arguments, the court applied the English common law standard of jus soli flagrantly against Congress's explicit rejection of it during ratification. The court rejected originalism in favor of textualism, and as a result, this nation ended up with a very different legal structure than what the Constitution created. So the bottom line is that the 14th Amendment did not establish birthright citizenship. It ensured that due process and the rights and privileges in the states are preserved. So when you listen to the oral arguments before the court today, you will hear this argument put forth, as well as the counter argument that simply stepping foot inside the United States and dropping a kid into the sand is the same thing as having that jurisdiction thereof. Let's see. Frey and the boys says, wow, I just got a $15 coupon for an oil change. They're reading my mind. LOL. Thank you for what you do, Zach. I am starting the challenge. Let's go, people. Thank you for that, my friend. I really do appreciate it. All right. Now, what's also crazy is that there is such a variety of opinions here. But as usual, Justice Samuel Alito, also, of course, Justice Clarence Thomas, they seem to be the most intelligent people on the court. He actually made the argument perfectly for why birthright citizenship should not be a thing. He suggested that just because illegal aliens were not a problem at the time of the 14th Amendment, when it was adopted, it does not mean they should not be addressed today. So let's go ahead and hear from Justice Alito in this exchange with D. John Sauer.
That they had in mind when they adopted the general rule, or do we say they adopted a general rule, they meant for that to apply to later applications that might come up? Justice Scalia had an example that dealt with this situation. He imagined an old theft statute that was enacted well before anybody conceived of a microwave oven, and then afterwards someone is charged with the crime of stealing a microwave oven, and this fellow says, well, I can't be convicted under this because the microwave oven didn't exist at that time. And he dismissed that. There's a general rule there, and you apply it to future applications. And what we're dealing with here is something that was basically unknown at the time when the 14th Amendment was adopted, which is illegal immigration. So how do we deal with that situation when we have a general rule?
Yeah, I strongly agree with the way that you framed it, that there is a general principle, that's a broad principle that's adopted in the phrase subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And we submit that our theory of allegiance and domicile-based allegiance is what explains those specific exceptions that everybody was aware of, but it is broad enough to sweep in future situations. And as you pointed out, illegal immigration did not exist then. Now, the problem of temporary visitors did exist. And it's very interesting that as you look at pages 26 and 28 of our brief, commentators going from 1881 until 1922 are uniformly saying the children of temporary visitors are not included. Now that logic, we say, it naturally extends. It's really an a fortiori case. If you have someone who enters illegally by the 1880s, there are restrictions on immigration. If you've entered illegally, it's kind of a well-established principle of law going back to the Code of Justinian that says you're not allowed to be there. You don't have the legal capacity to create domicile there.
But I think, General Sauer, that what you just said suggests that you can't be arguing in the way Justice Alito suggests, because most of your brief is not about illegal aliens. Most of your brief is about people who are just temporarily in the country, where there was quite clearly an experience of, an understanding of, that they were going to be temporary inhabitants.
So, regardless of what Elena Kagan said right there, Alito is correct, Scalia is correct. This argument that is being made by the left, by the ACLU, essentially suggesting that that people can just get away with this stuff because it wasn't thought of at the time, doesn't make any sense. Theft is theft, regardless of whether or not the invention existed at the time the statute was written. The plain text of the 14th Amendment refers to people who are not citizens of the United States. Regardless of how they arrived here, the 14th Amendment still applies to them the same. And Alito gets it, but Kagan, Sotomayor, and perhaps others don't seem to get it. Number one Indiana dad says, Frey and the boys called you. Thank you for that, sir. Appreciate you. And then also, I guess that right now, I get the Artemis 2 rocket is launching. I have attempted to see rocket launches from my house before, Marilise, but I'm not far enough south. So I'll probably just see a clip of it. We'll pull it up here in a little bit. All right. We also had this exchange right here with John Sauer and Justice John Roberts. Well, and actually, hold on just a second. There was something else that was history, reopen last close tab. All right. So we had the example of the microwave oven. Of course, even if the oven is not invented at the time that the statute is written, it is still theft, so it still applies. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof would mean that this allegiance has got to be in place. People must be citizens. Why is it that the left seems to believe that the text of the 14th Amendment does not apply to ambassadors or people who are just visiting, but it applies to illegal aliens who have already broken the law to come into our country in the first place? It clearly shouldn't. Now, Justice John Roberts seems to be one of those people who also has questions or hesitations on giving President Trump and the American people the win on this one. Illegal aliens owe allegiance to the country in which they were born. If they owed allegiance to the United States, they would have already gone through the process to become American citizens, and they wouldn't have entered the nation illegally. This is like rewarding someone. Okay, so let's say, like, I steal a car. Inside that car is a duffel bag with $1 million. I've stolen the car. I unintentionally stole the $1 million. If I'm caught by the police, I must give back both the $1 million and that car. I don't get to just keep the $1 million because it happened to be in the car at the time that I stole it, and I'm going to be charged with both of those crimes.
Well, starting with that theory, you obviously put a lot of weight on subject to the jurisdiction thereof. But the examples you give to support that strike me as very quirky. You know, children of ambassadors, children of enemies during a hostile invasion, children on warships. And then you expand it to a whole class of illegal aliens are here in the country. I'm not quite sure how you can get to that big group from such tiny and sort of idiosyncratic examples.
There are those sort of narrow exceptions for ambassador foreign public ships. Tribal Indians is an enormous one that they were very focused on in the debates as well. But what I do is I invite the court to look at the intervening step, which is the enactment of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. And there they didn't say subject to the jurisdiction thereof. There it says not subject to any foreign power. Now, if you go back to Blackstone and Calvin's case, they say it does not matter if you are subject to any foreign power. If you are born in the king's domains, you have this indefeasible duty of allegiance to the king at any time. So there's a clear repudiation in the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act is this breakwater which makes it very, very clear that they are not thinking about allegiance in the terms of like the British common law. They've adopted the Republican conception of allegiance. So it's from not subject to any foreign power, and then the debates just a couple months later make it very clear that they're recodifying the same conception. They were dissatisfied with the potential ambiguity in the phrase Indians not taxed, and they adopted subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And one of the strongest statements of this is Senator Trumbull's statement that I quoted at the beginning, where he says, he's asked, what does that mean, subject to the jurisdiction thereof? And he says, it means not owing allegiance to anybody else. That is what it means. And this court picked up on that in Elk against Wilkins when it says, it uses, completely subject to the political jurisdiction, not mere regulatory jurisdiction.
So I personally don't have a problem with casting a broad brush for anybody who is not a citizen of the United States. If they are not a citizen of the United States, it doesn't make any sense why they should receive the benefits of having their children become citizens just because they happen to be here at the time that child is born. Now, here is an argument being made between Justice Elena Kagan and John Sauer, and in this instance, she attempts to school him on birthright citizenship, and he's got quite the response. Let's go ahead and hear this. And actually, let me just go to the tweet. All right. So she tries to get Sauer into a corner during these arguments on birthright citizenship. She suggests that the challenger's position has relied on some esoteric theory rather than the plain text, which I've read for you on more than one occasion, not just today, but other days in the past. Sauer went through and dismantled her whole argument because the men who wrote the 14th Amendment and the predecessor to the 14th Amendment, which was the Civil Rights Act, I believe, of 1866, they defined jurisdiction as requiring complete allegiance to the United States. They could have no allegiance to any other state. What's also interesting is that if this is successful, it seems to me like an argument could be made to also do away with dual citizenship. I am also against the concept of dual citizenship because when you have dual citizenship, you do not have total allegiance to the United States of America. Your allegiance is split between one nation and another. I don't care what nation it is, any other nation that you hold allegiance to that is not the United States of America, that to me is a problem, especially among people who are in elected office or if they are simply working in civil service. Temporary visitors, diplomats, people who are not domiciled with that full loyalty, according to the 14th Amendment, were never intended to pass on automatic citizenship to the children who were born here. And this is not like a new idea. This is a consistent understanding that has been upheld for decades. It's been backed by Congress. It's been backed by the debates. It's been backed by treatises. It's been backed by prior cases that have come before the court. So this modern insistence that universal birthright citizenship, simply because you're physically present in the United States, is completely ignoring the arguments that we've stated here that the framers had at the time that they wrote this.
General Sauer, that what you just said suggests that you can't be arguing in the way Justice Alito suggests, because most of your brief is not about illegal aliens. Most of your brief is about people who are just temporarily in the country, where there was quite clearly an experience of, an understanding of, that there were going to be temporary inhabitants. And your whole theory of the case is built on that group. You don't get to talking about undocumented persons until quite later and at much lesser, I think it's like 10 pages to 3 pages or something like that. So you can't really be going with Justice Alito's theory. You must be saying that there is a principle that developed, that was there at the time of the 14th Amendment. Isn't that right?
We agree there's a principle there at the 14th Amendment. It is jurisdiction means allegiance, the allegiance of and this very strongly reflected in the 19th century sources, the allegiance of an alien present in another country is determined by domicile. And that goes back to the Venus and the Pizarro. It goes through the Katza affair in 1853. It comes right up to Fong Yui Ting and Lau Ao Bu that are decided shortly before Wong Kim Ark. So that's the principle. That principle clearly applies here. I also respectfully disagree with that.
And I guess, Mr. General Sauer, where does this principle come from? Allegiance, domicile, allegiance, I think you point to a Lincoln funeral speech as your primary example of where this principle comes from. It's certainly not what we think of when we think of the word jurisdiction, and I appreciate that jurisdiction has many meanings, but the first meaning is like if you're
Yes, the SCOTUS justices routinely talk right over the lawyers who are arguing their points. And it does seem a little bit jarring when it happens, but get used to it because you hear it a lot in this one in particular.
Subject to jurisdiction, you're subject to the authority of. One doesn't say, what that means is a certain kind of allegiance that domiciliaries have and nobody else does.
What's also interesting is what she just said there. That allegiance, that she interprets it to mean that you're subject to the authority of. If that's the argument, then these people are already not having allegiance because they've come into the country illegally. And of course, that baby has no ability to swear allegiance. The allegiance is based upon the prior standing of their parents, and their parents are breaking the law to come here and have these babies.
So the text of the clause, I think, does not support you. I think you're sort of looking for some more technical, esoteric meaning. And then the question comes, okay, if the text doesn't support you, if there's a real history of people using it that way, but as far as I can tell, at the time of the 14th, you're using some pretty obscure sources to get to this concept.
Well, I take it straight from the framers' mouths. So, for example, Senator Trumbull was asked, what does jurisdiction mean? He means subject to the jurisdiction. He said, what does that mean? He says it means not owing allegiance to anybody else. He is the principal framer of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Representative Bigham, who's the framer of the 14th Amendment, is asked, what does it mean in the congressional record at page 1291? He says, within the jurisdiction of the United States of parents not owing allegiance to any foreign sovereignty. And we've cited many, many examples where the congressional debates reflect that. Then you referred to the oration of George Bancroft. That's one of probably 16 sources, but there's at least 13, counting that one in the 12 treatises we cited, pages 26 to 28 of our brief. There is over a dozen sources that specifically address temporary sojourners. In the 5 decades after the enactment of the amendment, every single one of them says, well, temporary sojourners, their children are not included, including for 2 decades after Wong Kim Ark.
What is an illegal alien or someone just visiting from another country but a temporary sojourner? If they were intending to come here and abide by the laws of the United States, pledge allegiance to the United States, There is a process by which that happens. That is well settled in our immigration law. But of course, and this is why originalism versus textualism is so important, because our framers defined all of these terms. They agonized over this stuff in order to get this passed. But modern day liberals, the left, the deep state, they want textualism. They want this new modern interpretation of these words. They want to put the thoughts and intention into the minds of the people who wrote these laws so that they can then change them to fit whatever situation they want. Now, Justice Clarence Thomas, also, again, as I said, very brilliant, just forced the birthright citizenship debate to go back to those first principles. This is where, again, originalism would be so important. And he and the Solicitor General, John Sauer, have another fairly illuminating conversation.
General Sauer, before we get into the broader national issues, would you start with Dred Scott? Dred Scott was a case about state citizenship. It was a diversity case. And of course, we know what Chief Justice Taney did with that. How does the Citizenship Clause respond specifically to Dred Scott and answers or changes or corrects its answer as to citizenship? The other point is the Citizenship Clause refers not just to national citizenship, but also to state citizenship. Are we to have two different definitions for those? It's one word, citizens of the United States and citizens of the state wherein they reside. So as you begin, I'd like you to go back at the beginning and be more specific about the answer, and I want you to explain whether or not those two definitions are the same or related.
Now, also, in the process of challenging the positions of the various attorneys that are arguing the other sides, Clarence Thomas and Alito and other SCOTUS justices that may be in favor of what the government is arguing, by challenging them and asking them to further define their position, it also could potentially have an effect on the other justices who have not yet bought into the rationale. And hearing the legal arguments coming from John Sauer may, in a sense, sway them to vote in the correct way.
And what state citizenship is based on.
Thank you, Justice Thomas. I'll maybe start by addressing Dred Scott. As you alluded to the fact, Dred Scott, imposed one of the worst injustices in the history of this court, and it led to the outbreak of the Civil War. It's very clear, and this court in all of its early cases interpreting the 14th Amendment said, the one pervading purpose, the main object of the Citizenship Clause is to overrule Dred Scott and establish the citizenship of the freed slaves. And if you look at the debates in the congressional record and discussion surrounding the adoption of the Citizenship Clause, what you see is a very clear understanding that the newly freed slaves and their children have a relationship of domicile. They do not have a relationship to any foreign power. For example, there's a comment where he says, look, people have been here for 5 generations and clearly have no relationships to any foreign African potentate, or have a relationship of allegiance to the United States. And that reinforces our point that allegiance is what the word jurisdiction means. It doesn't mean regulatory jurisdiction or sort of being merely subject to the laws. They're talking and they're thinking about it in those debates about allegiance. Now, as to your second question, if you look at the text of the clause, we believe it says, born in the United States, born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and the states of which they reside. So there's a constitutional.
Linda says, could we amend the 14th Amendment that it only refers to the freed slaves and their children to become citizens? In order to amend an amendment, you've got to go through the ratification process again. I would say that it is not necessary to do so because it's very clear to me and to John Sauer, the Solicitor General, that that is exactly what the 14th Amendment says. By going through this legal process and, arguing before the Supreme Court, ideally, the Supreme Court would back that up in a legal decision and say, yes, that is definitely what the 14th Amendment states. But what we're arguing here is whether or not they're willing to do that. I would hope that that's exactly what happens. However, if this is not what happens, then what you suggest may become necessary. But in order to do so, you've got to have the ratification of the majority of the states. And, of course, it's a very complicated process. That's why there hasn't been a successful amendment to the Constitution in such a long time.
Guarantee that applies to both federal or national and state citizenship. And the key point we make there is that that word reside, if you look at, for example, Section 1473 of Justice Story's commentaries, was understood to mean domicile. So when they say subject to the jurisdiction, and then they go on to say you're a citizen of the United States and the state in which they reside, the very text of the clause itself presupposes that the citizen is domiciled in the United States. If they're present in a state at all, they reside there. Reside means domicile in the Constitution, and we think that strongly supports our interpretation. It's textual evidence of our domicile-based theory of jurisdiction.
All right. Now, before we continue, I just have a very brief message.
General Sauer.
Very brief message from our friends over here on Rumble. Let me get this going, and then we will continue with oral arguments. You guys, there's a very interesting, little-known inside scoop that many creators here are talking about at Rumble behind the scenes. It's one of the reasons I do love Rumble. They've made a way for people to super chat creators so that we get paid almost immediately and without any fees. And if you didn't know, if you are monetized on YouTube and Twitch, they can take up to 50% of the donations that people give when they tip creators. But this method takes absolutely none. The platform takes zero fees. It ends up giving me nearly 100% of what you guys send. So you can super chat using Bitcoin, Tether, USD, or even Tether Gold stablecoins. And the tip then shows up just like a regular Rumble chat. And of course, I'm going to read it if you have a special message. All you need to do is download the Rumble wallet on the App Store and then send tips to your favorite creators, whether it's me or somebody else. You can also go to wallet.rumble.com, or you can download that app again directly from the App Store. It is seriously an amazing way to get rid of the middleman and to help fund the creator economy. So a big shout out to Rumble for making this disruptive technology. You can also use that QR code that you see on screen. Thank you very much. Now, Sherry K also says, my husband is a Navy brat. He was born in Naples, and his dad was stationed there. He is 100% a U.S. citizen, and he does not hold dual citizenship from Italy. It's the same for my uncle and Army, who was born in Germany. Yes, this is not something that most civilized nations participate in. That's why it's in such contention, because, of course, there was an effort here in the United States to dilute the population, and other countries, they recognize that this is dangerous. You cannot allow anybody who is simply present in your country who had a baby to allow them to just become a citizen. Now, of course, you knew that we would get to Ketanji Brown Jackson, and in typical fashion, she showed her lack of intelligence. The majority of the Supreme Court does appear to be a little bit skeptical of this attempt to end birthright citizenship. I don't know why, unless these people are bought and paid for in some fashion, but of course I can't prove that. But the interaction that John Sauer had with Ketanji Brown Jackson, I thought was great. So let's go ahead and jump to that. Now, John Sauer had said the lower court's decisions invalidated a policy of prime importance to the president and his administration in a manner that undermines our border security. Those decisions confer, without lawful justification, the privilege of American citizenship on hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of unqualified people. And if we jump to right here, let's see. So Justice Jackson had asked John Sauer, are we bringing pregnant women here for depositions? No, he said, as I stated earlier, the executive order turns on the lawfulness of status. So if you give birth to a baby in the hospital right now, it gets the birth certificate in the system. There's a computer system. And then she interrupted and said, so there's no opportunity. There's apparently no opportunity then for the same person to prove or say that they actually intended to stay in the United States. Of course not. The opposite is true. There are opportunities to dispute if they think they are wrongfully denied, which only happens in a tiny minority of cases. And after the baby has been denied citizenship, we go through the process. And I'm summarizing here, John Sauer says, the computer program automatically generates a social security number, provided the system automatically checks the immigration status of the parents, which there are robust databases for. It appears no different to the vast majority of birthing parents. And here is President Trump's comment earlier during this interaction. We are the only country in the world stupid enough to allow birthright citizenship, President Donald J. Trump. And that is the truth. I don't know of any other country where this is allowed. Now, during this interaction with Ketanji Brown Jackson, right here, this is a longer interaction, but essentially, John Sauer makes the argument once again and dismantles Ketanji Brown Jackson's arguments in favor of illegal immigration.
So I guess I am looking at your position in this case, and it boils down to requiring us to do at least these two things. One is believe that the framers were not importing the common law rule and understanding of birthright citizenship. And the second is to believe that what they were doing was departing from that common law rule in the way that you suggest. That is, they were seeking to have this turn on domicile. I think you have a number of hurdles to accomplish those two things. One of which, I think, is that when we look at this court's case law, and no one, I think, has mentioned Schooner's Exchange, but it appears that that was an 1812 case in which it seems as though the court had already accepted at the time of the ratification of the 14th Amendment that the allegiance that you were talking about was the English common law rule. That, in other words, allegiance meant that you are covered by the laws of the jurisdiction, that you can rely on that jurisdiction's protection. That's what allegiance meant. Now, you're saying today, no, allegiance meant something about loyalty or that kind of idea. But
certainly think about the concept of allegiance in your own life. If you pledge allegiance to something, then you are submitting yourself. You are saying you will protect, you are governed by, you owe your loyalty to. It's not simply that somebody has power over you. Jurisdiction may be thought of in that tense. I mean, if you're under the jurisdiction of the laws of another country when you visit there, but jurisdiction can also mean, obviously, the citizenship question.
The Supreme Court had, prior to the 14th Amendment, established that allegiance meant the common law definition. I think your first hurdle is to help us understand why we would believe that when the 14th Amendment was ratified, the framers weren't just incorporating what we had previously said it meant.
Page 572 of the congressional record.
And this is, again, why I love him, because he brings the citations. He brings the sauce on everything. It's funny because in a later interaction, Ketanji Brown Jackson attempts to quote a number of individuals, and she doesn't even know what she's talking about. Like, she's obviously looking at some notes that somebody put forth for her, but she doesn't know how to contextualize them. She doesn't know the positions they held. She doesn't know who it was that made these statements. John Sauer is prepared.
Directly addresses this. They say the concept of temporary and local allegiance from the Schooner Exchange is what is meant by, or temporary and local jurisdiction from the Schooner Exchange is what is meant by the word jurisdiction in the 14th Amendment. Senator Trumbull says, I thought about saying owing allegiance, but again, quote, there's a sort of allegiance from persons temporarily resident in the United States whom we have no right to make citizens. So he expressly and consciously rejected reliance on Schooner.
What do we do with, that's a debate, and it's a discussion, very valid, but then we have
Well, she's asking him to make the case, and then as soon as he begins to make the case, she immediately steps all over him. Sabrado says she is 100% retarded. It's painful. Yes, but it is also highly relevant to what we may be hearing from the ultimate decision that the SCOTUS justices collectively make. So I want to be able to refer back to this if necessary.
Subsequent debate between Fessenden and Wade where the same concept comes up and it becomes clear, at least from Senator Wade's perspective.
Yeah, who were Fessenden and Wade, Ketanji Brown Jackson? She calls them senators, but she doesn't really know if they're senators.
That's wrong. So Fessenden, and I'm not sure whether these are senators, I apologize. Fessenden says, suppose a person is born here of parents from abroad temporarily in this country. Wade responds, the senator says a person may be born here and not be a citizen. I know that is so in one instance, in the case of the children of foreign ministers who reside near the United States, et cetera, et cetera. So it appears as though in that exchange, at least Senator Wade believed that the English common law understanding of what it means to have allegiance, to be a temporary person on the soil, was what was being adopted.
Yeah, that exchange strongly supports us. If you look at it in context, Senator Wade has introduced a version that says only birth on U.S. soil and doesn't have any allegiance or jurisdictional element to it. And so Senator Fessenden stands up and says, well, that can't be right because, obviously, what about the children of temporary visitors? It has this, it's another one of these statements that has this appeal to a background understanding that we all agree that the temporary visitors, their children do not become citizens. And then Senator Wade has to kind of backtrack and say, well, what are the children of ambassadors? And in the end, Congress does not adopt Senator Wade's proposal. So we think that to the extent you can draw an inference from that, the inference strongly supports.
All right, well, let me just ask you about why we wouldn't see in the 14th Amendment anything about parental allegiance. Several of my colleagues...
Oh, this is a good one right here. Why do we not see anything about parental allegiance? It's implied.
Colleagues have talked about the fact that your view of this turns on what the status of the parents are and not the child, as would the born in the United States view of it. Can you help us understand why we wouldn't expect to see a mention of parents in the text of this amendment?
I think it was well understood that, for example, children cannot, newborns cannot form domicile, so it follows every 19th century.
That assumes domicile is in the test, and I'm asking you, how do we know that Congress did adopt the test that you say it adopted?
Yeah, when you're looking at 19th century conceptions of allegiance, the notion that the allegiance, again, we say domicile is instantiating the concept of allegiance for aliens as opposed to citizen. All of that, the 19th century understands the newborn's domicile, its allegiance follows the allegiance of the parents. And I point out that their theory relies on parental allegiance as well, because they recognize the exceptions for, hostile invading armies, for tribal Indians, for ambassadors. Again, the child's allegiance status, even on their view, turns on the status of the parent.
What do we do with Professor Mueller's amicus brief and the historical record and the fact that even at times in this country where we understood that the parents were declared enemies of the United States, I'm talking about World War II and Japanese internment, babies born in that circumstance were given birthright citizenship?
Well, those parents that she's referring to, even though they were in internment camps, it was a precautionary measure, and those people did not have their citizenship stripped of them. They were still citizens, and when the war concluded, they remained citizens. And so therefore, their children, having been born in the United States, despite the fact that it was wartime, they were also citizens.
So it seems as though this concept of allegiance of the parents really wasn't driving birthright citizenship, at least at this period of our history. So are you saying this is wrong, or they shouldn't have gotten birthright citizenship?
Well, if they were domiciled here, yes, they should have. If they were temporarily present, then no. But the executive practice we can see from the 1930s.
How does the temporary presence run with your concept of allegiance? I'm not sure I understand. So can you be clear? Are you saying...
Well, if they're temporarily present in the United States, they have no allegiance to the United States. They have an allegiance to their nation of origin.
That only people who are domiciled here, as you define it, can form the necessary loyalty to the United States?
It's not allegiance is not a question of subjective loyalty.
Okay.
It is something you owe. It's a reciprocal relationship between the citizen, whether they want it or not. They have that allegiance, and I think it's powerfully
on the basis of what?
Domicile. I mean, that's what it says in so many words in the Venus and the Pizarro. It says, look, if you're talking about an alien, if they're just temporarily passing through, No, they don't have allegiance, but if they've made it their permanent home, they become part of our political community, and they are analogous or akin to citizens.
All right, just quick.
Citizens, if they are analogous to citizens, and illegal aliens are not citizens. They are in their own special legal class. They have no right to be here. Therefore, they have no right to claim citizenship for their children.
Because I'm mindful of the time.
Is she, though? I don't think so.
What do you do with Juan Kim Ark's statement that birthright citizenship is applying, quote, independently of a residence with intention to continue such residence, independently of any domiciliation? I know that they use domicile. It's a fact in the case, but that's not a part of their holding. It's not what the reasoning turns on.
I believe you're quoting from page 693 of that opinion. It goes on to say, not citizen terms on that, but the duty of obedience to our laws. It doesn't take the further step at that point and say, therefore, if you have temporary and local allegiance, you're a citizen. And immediately before that, you have that page 693 summary of the court's holding where it says
you
domicile.
Say Juan Kim Ark incorporates a domicile requirement.
That is the holding. It's definitely clearly expressed in the holding.
All right, one final thing, perspective. You say...
Okay, we're going to stop there because I've got a couple of more that I wanted to go through. She also makes this ridiculous argument about stealing someone's wallet in the nation of Japan if she is present in Japan. And hold on, let me just turn off ads for this site. All right, so during these oral arguments, there was an exchange regarding subject of jurisdiction that she continues to harp on, and they all really... In the world of Ketanji Brown Jackson, being subject to criminal prosecution is apparently the same thing as allegiance, which is what is required for birthright citizenship. So listen to this. Oh, I have to turn ads back on to get this to work. Good God.
Trisha Heaton looks great at 67.
I also need to jump past this ad. Give me just one moment. Okay. This is one of the most retarded arguments I've ever heard. I don't know how she could have come to this.
On being born in whatever country you're from. That's what everybody recognizes. But you also have local allegiance when you are on the soil of this other sovereign. And I was thinking, I, a U.S. citizen, am visiting Japan. And what it means is that, if I steal someone's wallet in Japan, the Japanese authorities can arrest me and prosecute me. It's allegiance, meaning can they control you as a matter of law? I can also rely on them if my wallet is stolen to, under Japanese law, go and prosecute the person who has stolen it. So there's this relationship based on, even though I'm a temporary traveler, I'm just on vacation in Japan, I'm still locally owing allegiance in that sense. Is that the right way to think about it? And if so,
No.
Doesn't that explain why both temporary residents and undocumented people would have that kind of quote-unquote allegiance just by virtue of being in the United States?
That's absolutely right, Justice Jackson.
And of course, the ACLU thinks that's right. Allegiance is earned through loyalty and the legal process. Committing theft or fraud in a foreign land is not the same thing as allegiance. You would be subject to the jurisdiction of the laws of the country of Japan, and you may receive some remuneration or justice as a result of being a victim of a crime, but it is not the same thing as owing allegiance to the government by which you are a citizen. Now, here is the only clip I'm going to play from the ACLU lawyer. Apparently, she doesn't believe that domicile has ever been a test as part of the citizenship question. The woman making this argument, Cecilia Wang, who is a lawyer for the ACLU, it's funny because she actually had to argue against Justice Elena Kagan, who I thought would have agreed with her at every point, and also Sam Alito, Justice Alito. Now, Wang attempted to lean heavily on English common law and the 1898 case, U.S. versus Wong Kim Ark. She says that the history is settled, but she's completely ignoring what the actual case says. And it was funny that Elena Kagan wasn't buying the rationale that Miss Wang was attempting to present. Kagan pressed Wang on the specific language that was used in Wong Kim Ark, noting that the justices back then repeatedly mentioned domicile, meaning a permanent legal residence, as a key factor. But Miss Wang apparently didn't read that portion of the actual legal brief. And let me just get past this real fast. Okay.
Was not relevant, and the children born to temporary visitors in the territory of the sovereign were always considered birthright citizens.
Well, Ms. Wong, I mean, everything you say strikes me as, yeah, that's the way I read it too. But then what are those 20 domicile words doing there? Like, you can, take...
If domicile's got nothing to do with it, why does it say domicile so many times?
Some of them and say, they were just summarizing the facts of the case, but not all of them. And why did they keep on, why did they sprinkle that in the opinion?
Well, I think, again, those were the stipulated facts in the case. And it's clear we have textual evidence in the majority opinion that they were simply saying this is an a fortiori application of that controlling rule that comes from the English common law. Justice Gray writes, again, after setting out the English common law rule and the exceptions, with a single additional exception for children of members of Indian tribes, that the amendment in clear words and manifest intent includes the children born within the territory of the United States of all other persons of whatever race or color domiciled within the United States. And as was pointed out earlier, the very next part of that same paragraph, he cites to Webster talking about Thrasher's case, and he says, people who are born in this country owe allegiance independently of a residence within, foreign nationals owe allegiance independently of a residence with intention to continue such residence, independently of any domiciliation, and independently of taking any oath of allegiance, which is totally contrary to both the government's theory of dual allegiance or partial allegiance and to the theory of domiciliation.
I mean, I might agree with you if domicile had simply been sprinkled in the opinion, but in Wong Kim Ark, it's a long opinion, but it begins by saying, here's the question, and it ends by coming back to the question. And it says, here's the question stated at the beginning of the opinion, namely whether a child born in the United States of parents of Chinese descent who at the time of his birth are subjects of the Emperor of China but have a permanent domicile and residence in the United States and are there carrying on business, and he states the diplomatic exception, and he says, for the reasons above stated, this court is of the opinion that the question must be answered in the affirmative. So why put domicile in? Sometimes it's hard to figure out what is the holding of the case. Here he tells us this is the holding of the case. Why put domicile in there? It's just something, it's something irrelevant that he wanted to throw in. It's like, whether a child born in the United States of parents of Chinese descent who once resided at a particular address in San Francisco, who attempted to enter the country at the port of San Francisco. Why put it in if it's irrelevant?
Well, Justice Alito, I'll give you two responses. The first is that, again, it was a stipulated fact. The second is that regardless of what the judgment in the case was, which again was an a fortiori application of the rule of decision, the rule of decision in Wong Kim Ark has binding precedential effect. Even if you think that Wong Kim Ark decided the case based on the stipulated facts, you have to follow that controlling rule of decision. And if you follow that rule, you get to the same result for people without domicile. Wong Kim Ark says 6 times in the first parts of the opinion, as well as on the page the government focuses on, that domicile is not relevant.
Well, Ms. Wong, on that, what do we do with the fact that after Wong Kim Ark, at least some authorities took the view that the non-domiciliary question wasn't decided, remained open, and even continued to press the view that domicile is required. Now, I know you've got a lot of good stuff on your side too, but what do we do with the fact that many sound legal authorities thought it remained an open question, even if one of them wasn't John Marshall Harlan?
I liked your example from Justice Harlan's lecture here in D.C. So here's what I would say. All of the government citations in their brief generally either were rejected by Wong Kim Ark expressly if they predated Wong Kim Ark.
If we're trying to understand how the legal community understood what happened in Wong Kim Ark, it seems to me it's a mess. So maybe you can persuade me otherwise.
I think I can, Justice Gorsuch. First, as to the post-Wong Kim Ark authorities the government cites, each one of them is inconsistent with Wong Kim Ark's reasoning or doesn't mention it at all. Most of them have very little reasoning at all. And in contrast, what we have on our side, post-Wong Kim Ark, is numerous federal court decisions.
Federal court decisions that clearly ignore the original plain text. All right. Now, Justice Alito also had an interaction with the lawyer for the ACLU, and he specifically sounded the alarm that unlimited birthright citizenship means that a Chinese, an Iranian, a Russian, a foreigner, any of these people can have children in the United States. And that would mean that a U.S. citizen would then owe military allegiance to a foreign adversary. They have the duty of military service. This is what we were talking about earlier. And it seems that that makes them subject to a foreign power. Those three nations each have mandatory conscription. Not subject to any foreign power is pretty straightforward. So let me give you these examples. A boy is born here to an Iranian father who has entered the country illegally. That boy is automatically an Iranian national at birth, and he has a duty to provide military service to the Iranian government. Is he not subject to any foreign power? And she said, what I said about a boy born to an Iranian father is true of children born here to parents who were nationals of other countries. It's true to a child who's born here to Russian parents. Now, of course, the framers would have considered these things. That's why in order to gain citizenship, you must be not subject to another country. You must have permanent, full allegiance to the United States of America. So I think that you guys already understand that concept. We're not going to go into that. Justice Amy Coney Barrett also seemed to be somewhat skeptical. And Justice John Sauer also, I felt, made a fairly strong argument in relation to her questions.
In your reply brief that the children of slaves who were brought here unlawfully, in defiance of laws forbidding the slave trade, would in fact be citizens. And we can imagine that their parents were not only brought here in violation of United States law, but were here against their will, and so maybe felt allegiance to the countries where they were from. And you say that the purpose of the 14th Amendment was to put all slaves on equal footing, newly freed slaves on equal footing, and so they would be citizens. But that's not textual. So how do you get there? You say it in just a few sentences, so can you elaborate?
Sure. If you look at I think if you look at the 19th century sources, what you see is that even though their entry may have been unlawful, 19th century antebellum law never treated their presence as unlawful. In fact, quite the opposite. One of the amici, in fact, points to like a Mississippi statute, which probably is replicated throughout the South before the Civil War, that says slaves in Mississippi have an indefeasible domicile in Mississippi. In other words, even if they run away, if they get away, Mississippi says, nope, you still live here. Right? And so it would be astonishing, in other words, for the opponents of the 14th Amendment to say, oh, these people were not domiciled and therefore it goes the other way, because actually U.S. law, even if they were brought in illegally and through an illegal slave trade, once they were there by
their intent is to return as soon as they can, let's say. So they're here, they're resident, and maybe under your theory, which says, lawfulness for a different purpose, but they're here, they're resident, let's take your assumption that they're not here unlawfully. But let's say they don't have an intent to stay. They want to escape and go back the second they can. Are they domiciled?
Under the 19th century law, I mean, I think this is the flip side of the hypothetical that we were talking about earlier. Under 19th century law, they are treated as domiciled in the United States, so it'd be astonishing. And the debates in the congressional floor talk about not this specific case, but to say, look, slaves who have been forced to come here and have been here are lawfully domiciled here. I mean, they don't use the ways domiciled, but like they use allegiance. They say they don't have allegiance to, once they've been forced to come here, they don't have allegiance to any foreign or African potentate, and therefore
General, that goes
how would that
law.
apply to the children of illegally trafficked people today? Would the same reasoning apply?
It would turn on whether the parents are lawfully domiciled in the United States.
So if they're brought in illegally, but then they choose to remain and they want to remain and they're domiciled, you would say that their lawful presence is not dictated by whether they were brought here lawfully or not. And that's different from someone who, say, crosses the border unlawfully.
Yeah, I think it would turn on whether their presence is lawful.
General,
in other words, obviously there may be many other important things that could be done to assist people like that. The question is, if they give birth to someone in the United States, that person naturally a citizen, that would turn, based on the original public meaning of the clause, on the lawfulness of their presence.
If the parents are here legally, if they have domicile through legal means, they have children here, those children can become citizens of the United States. If they are here illegally, no, they cannot have citizenship. And to the argument about temporary visitors, once again, if temporary visitors' children do not get citizenship, illegal aliens have an even weaker case, because the children of ambassadors, the children of foreign dignitaries who are here in the country through legal means, those children do not get citizenship. They are immediately the citizens of the country by which their parents owe their allegiance. Justice Gorsuch gave Solicitor General Sauer the opening to drive home the strongest version of the administration's argument. This exchange centered on the principle of legal interpretation. When lawmakers enact a general rule in response to specific problems, does that rule apply only to the original situations, or does it, of course, extend into the future into ones that fit the same logic? And the answer that Sauer gave was unambiguous. The recognized exceptions to birthright citizenship: children of foreign ambassadors, children born during hostile occupation. Those are specific applications of a broader principle. Allegiance determines the jurisdiction. The principle doesn't freeze in time. Illegal immigrants did not exist at the time that the amendment was created, but the problem of temporary visitors did exist, and commentators from 1881 until 1922 uniformly say that children of temporary visitors are not included in the 14th Amendment. And then he made the fortiori case, the argument that if the weaker claim fails, the stronger one must fail too. If children of legal temporary visitors aren't automatically citizens, then children of people who entered in violation of the law have an even weaker claim than those people who are here through some legal means where they are not citizens. By the 1880s, immigration restrictions existed. Someone who entered illegally cannot establish domicile, a principle that also traces back to the Code of Justinian. What Sauer is constructing is not a narrow workaround. It's a constitutional framework rooted in the text, history, and legal tradition that spans centuries, going back to Roman times. Allegiance and domicile, not geography and accident of birth. Thank you very much to TJ Feel the Burn for the $50 rant. Very generous, my friend. Now we know why the authorities let illegals go right back into the public after they are arrested for a crime. There is no allegiance afforded to them automatically, so the left judges let them go. Yeah, absolutely. And Freya and Boys drops a YouTube video. We'll end the show with that. All right. Now, Justice Kavanaugh also delivered a sharper exchange on the birthright citizenship argument. He pressed Sauer on why the 14th Amendment used different language than the Civil Rights Act of 1866 if they were meant to say the same thing. And Sauer said the court has long held they mean the same thing. The framers preferred the positive formulation, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, to clear up ambiguity with Indians not taxed, while keeping the core requirement of full allegiance intact. Congressional records show they explicitly understood they were doing the same thing. Kavanaugh also noted Congress repeated the exact language in the 1940 and 1952 Immigration Acts. Sauer explained that this was Congress codifying the constitutional baseline, not adopting a broader view. The structure of the statute treats subsection A as the constitutional floor and adds statutory citizenship categories beyond that floor. Justice Barrett then zoomed in on the jus soli versui jus sanguis questions, how the amendment blends elements of both. Sauer described it as modified jus soli that still demands a relationship of allegiance to the sovereign consistent with English common law sources like Calvin's case. The entire line of questioning reinforces what conservatives have argued for years, which is that the 14th Amendment does not have open citizenship to anybody who simply steps foot onto U.S. soil, regardless of parental allegiance or lawful status. Also, thank you to Ravelin, who says, what do you think should be the citizenship status of Meghan Markle, Candace Owens, and the other American wives of British nobles? Prince Harry's children are 6th and 7th in line to the UK throne. I thought that Meghan Markle had to give up her citizenship to become the princess. If she didn't, if she was given British citizenship by marrying a British citizen, then, that is currently legal. Personally, I don't believe that anybody should have dual citizenship. I think that if you want to attain citizenship in another country, you should have to relinquish your citizenship here in the United States. And also the children born to Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, if she still retains both citizenships, they do not automatically extend to them. They would remain simply citizens of the United Kingdom. All right. And we will go ahead and end it there. Let me pull up this video from Freya.
I can handle things. I'm smart. Not like everybody says. Like dumb. I'm smart and I want respect.
Oh, Fredo, where are you when we need you? That is definitely Ketanji Brown Jackson right there. Oh, my goodness. All right, you guys, let me go through these final thank yous over here, and then I will see you all on your way. All right. Before we go, one final message from our friends over here on Rumble. You guys, if you have not yet tried 1775 coffee, there is an opportunity to do so. You can get one of their starter kits. They have the bold dark roast, their smooth medium roast, and that vitality mushroom coffee that gives you clean energy and laser focus without the crash. It's all single origin, small batch, toxin, and mold free. Plus, you're going to get that gold spoon clip, a very strong frother, and a black 1775 tumbler. It's $170 worth of coffee and gear, and it's all yours for $99. This is for the people who have been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble and wonder if it's actually worth it. Should they try it? The answer is yes, you absolutely should. And to do that, you just head on over to 1775coffee.com. Again, it is a spectacular deal, $99 for $170 worth of coffee and gear, 1775coffee.com/studio, and get yourself one of those starter kits before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something just like a Rumble does. And I also want to tell you guys about a special offer that another one of my sponsors is having. My friends over at onenessdrops.com, onenessdrops.com/BOGO Red Pill 78, because when you use BOGO Red Pill 78 for the month of April, you will get a buy one, get one free on everything that they offer at onenessdrops.com, where, of course, they offer chlorine dioxide water purification kits, the mullein extract for lung health, the soursop extract for cellular regeneration, and, of course, a number of other things like pure DMSO. And if you want to get one of their bundles, you will get a buy one, get one free on the bundle. And you just got to use BOGO Red Pill 78, onenessdrops.com/BOGO Red Pill 78 to take advantage of this special deal for the month of April. I have that link down below, and you can find that in the description of this video. So thank you very much to everybody for hanging out with us today. Sean Joe, thank you for the 3 cans, and that will officially be the final thank yous. And let me just make sure I didn't miss anything over here on a Rumble. Okay. Yep, that would be it. All right, you guys, that's all. I will be live tonight at 9 on Badlands to do the color commentary on President Trump's announcement, thinking that he is going to be leaving NATO, and, of course, telling everybody what an awesome job he's been doing, because he truly has. Good luck. God bless. If I don't see you tonight, I'll see you back here tomorrow at 5 p.m. for another episode of Red Pill News Live. Until that time, peace. Also, hit the like button. Make sure you hit that like button, guys. That would really help out.